The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades by H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Abigail Rasmussen, April 2012. The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades by H. Rider Haggard. Author's Note and Prologue. Two lovers by the maiden state, without a glance of jealous hate. The maid her lovers sat between, with open brow and equal mien. It is a sight but rarely spied, thanks to man's wrath and woman's pride. Scott. Author's Note. Standing a while ago upon the flower-clad plain above Tiberias, by the Lake of Galilee, the writer gazed at the double peaks of the hill of Hattin. Here, or so tradition says, Christ preached the Sermon on the Mount, that perfect rule of gentleness and peace. Here, too, and this is certain, after nearly 12 centuries had gone by, Yusuf Saladin, whom we know as the Sultan Saladin, crushed the Christian power in Palestine, in perhaps the most terrible battle which that land of blood has known. Thus the Mount of the Beatitudes became the Mount of Massacre. Whilst musing on these strangely contrasted scenes enacted in one place, there arose in his mind a desire to weave, as best he might, a tale wherein any who are drawn to the romance of that pregnant and mysterious epoch, when men by thousands were glad to lay down their lives for visions and spiritual hopes, could find a picture, however faint and broken, of the long war between Cross and Crescent waged among the Syrian plains and deserts. Of Christian knights and ladies also, and their loves and sufferings in England and the East. Of the fearful lord of the assassins, whom the Franks called Old Man of the Mountain, and his fortress city Masyaf. Of the great-hearted, if at times cruel, Saladin and his fierce Saracens. Of the rout at Hattin itself, on whose rocky height the Holy Rood was set up as a standard and captured, to be seen no more by Christian eyes. And of the last surrender, whereby the Crusaders lost Jerusalem forever. Of that desire this story is the fruit. Prologue. Saladin, commander of the faithful, the king strong to aid, sovereign of the East, sat at night in his palace in Damascus, and brooded on the wonderful ways of God, by whom he had been lifted to his high estate. He remembered how, when he was but small in the eyes of men, Nur-ed-Din, king of Syria, forced him to accompany his uncle, Shirkuh, to Egypt, whither he went, like one driven to his death, and how, against his own will, there he rose to greatness. He thought of his father, the wise Ayyub, and the brethren with whom he was brought up, all of them dead now save one, and of his sisters, whom he had cherished. Most of all did he think of her, Zobeide, who had been stolen away by the knight whom she loved, even to the loss of her own soul. Yes, by the English friend of his youth, his father's prisoner, Sir Andrew Darcy, who, led astray by passion, had done him and his house this grievous wrong. He had sworn, he remembered, that he would bring her back even from England, and already had planned to kill her husband and capture her when he learned her death. She had left a child, or so his spies told him, who, if she still lived, must be a woman now, his own niece, though half of noble English blood. Then his mind wandered from this old, half-forgotten story to the woe and blood in which his days were set, and to the last great struggle between the followers of the prophets of Jesus and Mahomet, that jihad holy war for which he made ready, and he sighed, for he was a merciful man who loved not slaughter, although his fierce faith drove him from war to war. Saladin slept and dreamed of peace. In his dream a maiden stood before him. Presently, when she lifted her veil, he saw that she was beautiful, with features like his own, but fairer, and knew her surely for the daughter of his sister, who had fled with the English knight. Now he wondered why she visited him thus, and in his vision prayed Allah to make the matter clear. Then of a sudden he saw this same woman standing before him on a Syrian plain, and on either side of her a countless host of Saracens and Franks, of whom thousands and tens of thousands were appointed to death. Lo, he, Saladin, charged at the head of his squadrons, scimitar aloft, but she held up her hand and stayed him. "What do you here, my niece?" he asked. "I am come to save the lives of men through you," she answered. "Therefore was I born of your blood, and therefore I am sent to you. Put up your sword, King, and spare them." "Say, maiden, what ransom do you bring to buy this multitude from doom? What ransom and what gift?" "The ransom of my own blood freely offered, and heaven's gift of peace to your sinful soul, O King." And with that outstretched hand she drew down his keen-edged scimitar until it rested on her breast. Saladin awoke and marvelled on his dream, but said nothing of it to any man. The next night it returned to him, and the memory of it went with him all the day that followed, but still he said nothing. When on the third night he dreamed it yet again, even more vividly, then he was sure that this thing was from God, and summoned his holy imams and his diviners, and took counsel with them. These, after they had listened, prayed, and consulted, spoke thus: "O Sultan, Allah has warned you in shadows that the woman, your niece, who dwells far away in England, shall by her own nobleness and sacrifice in some time to come save you from shedding a sea of blood and bring rest upon the land. We charge you, therefore, draw this lady to your court, and keep her ever by your side, since if she escape you, her peace goes with her." Saladin said that this interpretation was wise and true, for thus also he had read his dream. Then he summoned a certain false knight who bore the cross upon his breast, but in secret had accepted the Koran, a Frankish spy of his, who came from that country where dwelt the maiden, his niece, and from him learned about her, her father, and her home. With him and another spy who passed as a Christian palmer, by the aid of Prince Hassan, one of the greatest and most trusted of his emirs, he made a cunning plan for the capture of the maiden, if she should not come willingly, and for her bearing away to Syria. Moreover, that in the eyes of all men her dignity might be worthy of her high blood and fate, by his decree he created her, the niece whom he had never seen, Princess of Baalbec, with great possessions, a rule that her grandfather Ayyub and her uncle Izzeddin had held before her. Also he purchased a stout galley of war, manning it with proved soldiers and with chosen men at arms, under the command of the Prince Hassan, and wrote a letter to the English lord, Sir Andrew Darcy, and to his daughter, and prepared a royal gift of jewels, and sent them to the lady, his niece, far away in England, and with it the patent of her rank. Her he commanded this company to win by peace, or force, or fraud, as best they might, but that without her not one of them should dare to look upon his face again. And with these he sent the two Frankish spies, who knew the place where the lady lived, one of whom, the false knight, was a skilled mariner and the captain of the ship. These things did Yusuf Saladin, and waited patiently till it should please God to accomplish the vision with which God had filled his soul in sleep. End of author's note and prologue. Chapter 1 of The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades, by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Abigail Rasmussen in April 2012. Chapter 1. By the Waters of Death Creek. From the sea wall on the coast of Essex, Rosamund looked out across the ocean eastwards. To right and left, but a little behind her, like guards attending the person of their sovereign, stood her cousins, the twin brethren, Godwin and Wulf, tall and shapely men. Godwin was still as a statue, his hands folded over the hilt of the long scabbarded sword, of which the point was set on the ground before him. But Wulf, his brother, moved restlessly, and at length yawned aloud. They were beautiful to look at, all three of them, as they appeared in the splendour of their youth and health. The imperial Rosamund, dark-haired and eyed, ivory-skinned and slender-waisted, a posy of marsh flowers in her hand. The pale, stately Godwin with his dreaming face, and the bold-fronted, blue-eyed warrior, Wulf, Saxon to his fingertips, notwithstanding his father's Norman blood. At the sound of that unstifled yawn, Rosamund turned her head with the slow grace which marked her every movement. "Would you sleep already, Wulf, and the sun not yet down?" she asked in her rich, low voice, which perhaps, because of its foreign accent, seemed quite different to that of any other woman. "I think so, Rosamund," he answered. "It would serve to pass the time, and now that you have finished gathering those yellow flowers which we rode so far to seek, the time is somewhat long." "Shame on you, Wulf," she said, smiling. "Look upon yonder sea and sky, at the sheet of bloom all gold and purple." "I have looked for hard on half an hour, cousin Rosamund. Also at your back and at Godwin's left arm and side face, till in truth I thought myself kneeling in Stangate Priory, staring at my father's effigy upon his tomb, while Prior John pattered the mass. Why, if you stood it on its feet, it is Godwin, the same crossed hands resting on the sword, the same cold, silent face staring at the sky." "Godwin, as Godwin will no doubt one day be, or so he hopes. That is, if the saints give him grace to do such deeds as did our sire," interrupted his brother. Wulf looked at him, and a curious flash of inspiration shone in his blue eyes. "No, I think not," he answered. "The deeds you may do, and greater, but surely you will lie wrapped not in a shirt of mail, but with a monk's cowl at the last, unless a woman robs you of it and the quickest road to heaven. Tell me now, what are you thinking of, you two? For I have been wandering in my dull way, and am curious to learn how far I stand from truth. Rosamund, speak first. Nay, not all the truth. A maid's thoughts are her own, but just the cream of it, that which rises to the top and should be skimmed." Rosamund sighed. I was thinking of the East, where the sun shines ever, and the seas are blue as my girdle stones, and men are full of strange learning." "And women are men's slaves," interrupted Wulf. "Still, it is natural that you should think of the East, who have that blood in your veins, and high blood, if all tales be true. Say, princess," and he bowed the knee to her with an affectation of mockery which could not hide his earnest reverence. "Say, princess, my cousin, granddaughter of Ayyub, and niece of the mighty monarch Yusuf Saladin, do you wish to leave this pale land and visit your dominions in Egypt and in Syria?" She listened, and at his words her eyes seemed to take fire, the stately form to erect itself, the breast to heave, and the thin nostrils to grow wider as though they scented some sweet, remembered perfume. Indeed, at that moment, standing there on the promontory above the seas, Rosamund looked a very queen. Presently she answered him with another question. "And how would they greet me there, Wulf, who am a Norman Darcy and a Christian maid?" "The first they would forgive you, since that blood is none so ill either. And for the second, why, faiths can be changed." Then it was that Godwin spoke for the first time. "Wulf, Wulf," he said sternly, "keep watch upon your tongue, for there are things that should not be said, even as a silly jest. See you, I love my cousin here better than aught else upon the earth." "There, at least, we agree," broke in Wulf. "Better than aught else on the earth," repeated Godwin. "But by the holy blood and by St. Peter, at whose shrine we are, I would kill her with my own hand before her lips kissed the book of the false prophet." "Or any of his followers," muttered Wulf to himself, but fortunately, perhaps, too low for either of his companions to hear. Aloud he said, "You understand, Rosamund, you must be careful, for Godwin ever keeps his word, and that would be but a poor end for so much birth and beauty and wisdom." "Oh, cease mocking, Wulf," she answered, laying her hand lightly on the tunic that hid his shirt of mail. "Cease mocking, and pray St. Chad, the builder of this church, that no such dreadful choice may ever be forced upon you, or me, or your beloved brother, who indeed, in such a case, would do right to slay me." "Well, if it were," answered Wulf, and his fair face flushed as he spoke, "I trust that we should know how to meet it. After all, is it so very hard to choose between death and duty?" "I know not," she replied, "but ofttimes sacrifice seems easy when seen from far away. Also things may be lost that are more prized than life." "What things? Do you mean place or wealth or love?" "Tell me," said Rosamund, changing her tone, "what is that boat rowing round the river's mouth? A while ago it hung upon its oars as though those within it watched us." "Fisher folk," answered Wulf carelessly. "I saw their nets." "Yes, but beneath them something gleamed bright, like swords." "Fish," said Wulf. "We are at peace in Essex." Although Rosamund did not look convinced, he went on. "Now for Godwin's thoughts. What were they?" "Brother, if you would know, of the East also, the East and its wars." "Which have brought us no great luck," answered Wulf, "seeing that our sire was slain in them, and naught of him came home again save his heart, which lies at Stangate yonder." "How better could he die," asked Godwin, "than fighting for the cross of Christ? Is not that death of his at Harenc told of to this day? By Our Lady, I pray for one but half as glorious." "Aye, he died well, he died well," said Wulf, his blue eyes flashing and his hand creeping to his sword hilt. "But, brother, there is peace at Jerusalem as in Essex." "Peace, yes, but soon there will be war again. The monk Peter, he whom we saw at Stangate last Sunday, and who left Syria but 6 months ago, told me that it was coming fast. Even now the Sultan Saladin, sitting at Damascus, summons his host from far and wide, while his priests preach battle amongst the tribes and barons of the East. And when it comes, brother, shall we not be there to share it, as were our grandfather, our father, our uncle, and so many of our kin? Shall we rot here in this dull land, as by our uncle's wishes we have done these many years, yes, ever since we were home from the Scottish war, and count the kine and plough the fields like peasants, while our peers are charging on the pagan, and the banners wave, and the blood runs red upon the holy sands of Palestine?" Now it was Wulf's turn to take fire. "By Our Lady in heaven, and Our Lady here," and he looked at Rosamund, who was watching the pair of them with her quiet, thoughtful eyes. "Go when you will, Godwin, and I go with you, and as our birth was one birth, so, if it is decreed, let our death be one death." And suddenly his hand, that had been playing with the sword hilt, gripped it fast and tore the long, lean blade from its scabbard, and cast it high into the air, flashing in the sunlight, to catch it as it fell again, while in a voice that caused the wild fowl to rise in thunder from the saltings beneath, Wulf shouted the old war cry that had rung on so many a field: "A D'Arcy, meet! D'Arcy, meet! Death!" Then he sheathed his sword again, and added in a shamed voice, "Are we children that we fight where no foe is? Still, brother, we may find him soon." Godwin smiled grimly, but answered nothing. Only Rosamund said, "So, my cousins, you would be away, perhaps to return no more, and that will part us. But," and her voice broke somewhat, "such is the woman's lot, since men like you ever loved the bare sword best of all, nor should I think well of you were it otherwise. Yet, cousins, I know not why," and she shivered a little, "it comes into my heart that Heaven often answers such prayers swiftly. Oh, Wulf, your sword looked very red in the sunlight, but now I say that it looked very red in the sunlight. I am afraid of I know not what. Well, we must be going, for we have 9 miles to ride, and the dark is not so far away. But first, my cousins, come with me into this shrine, and let us pray St. Peter and St. Chad to guard us on our journey home." "Our journey?" said Wulf anxiously. "What is there for you to fear in a 9-mile ride along the shores of the Black Water?" "I said our journey home, Wulf, and home is not in the hall at Steeple, but yonder," and she pointed to the quiet, brooding sky. "Well answered," said Godwin. "In this ancient place, whence so many have journeyed home, all the Romans who are dead, when it was their fortress, and the Saxons who came after them, and others without count." Then they returned and entered the old church, one of the first that ever was in Britain, rough built of Roman stone by the very hands of Chad, the Saxon saint, more than 500 years before their day. Here they knelt a while at the rude altar and prayed, each of them in his or her own fashion, then crossed themselves, and rose to seek their horses, which were tied in the shed hard by. Now there were 2 roads, or rather tracks, back to the hall at Steeple. One a mile or so inland, that ran through the village of Bradwell, and the other, the shorter way, along the edge of the Saltings to the narrow water known as Death Creek, at the head of which the traveller to Steeple must strike inland, leaving the priory of Stangate on his right hand. It was this latter path they chose, since at low tide the going there is good for horses, which, even in the summer, that of the inland track was not. Also, they wished to be home by supper time, lest the old knight, Sir Andrew D'Arcy, the father of Rosamund and the uncle of the orphan brethren, should grow anxious and perhaps come out to seek them. For the half of an hour or more they rode along the edge of the Saltines, for the most part in silence that was broken only by the cry of curlew and the lap of the turning tide. No human being did they see, indeed, for this place was very desolate and unvisited, save now and again by fishermen. At length, just as the sun began to sink, they approached the shore of Death Creek, a sheet of tidal water which ran a mile or more inland, growing ever narrower, but was here some 300 yards in breadth. They were well mounted, all three of them. Indeed, Rosamund's horse, a great grey, her father's gift to her, was famous in that countryside for its swiftness and power, also because it was so docile that a child could ride it, while those of the brethren were heavy built, but well-trained war steeds, taught to stand where they were left and to charge when they were urged, without fear of shouting men or flashing steel. Now the ground lay thus, some 70 yards from the shore of Death Creek, and parallel to it, a tongue of land, covered with scrub and a few oaks, ran down into the Saltines, its point ending on their path, beyond which were a swamp and the broad river. Between this tongue and the shore of the creek the track wended its way to the uplands. It was an ancient track. Indeed, the reason of its existence was that here the Romans, or some other long dead hands, had built a narrow mole, or a quay of rough stone 40 or 50 yards in length, out into the water of the creek, doubtless to serve as a convenience for fisher boats, which could lie alongside of it even at low tide. This mole had been much destroyed by centuries of washing, so that the end of it lay below water, although the landward part was still almost sound and level. Coming over the little rise at the top of the wooded tongue, the quick eyes of Wulf, who rode first, for here the path along the border of the swamp was so narrow that they must go in single file, caught sight of a large empty boat moored to an iron ring set in the wall of the mole. "Your fishermen have landed, Rosamund," he said, "and doubtless gone up to Bradwell." "That is strange," she answered anxiously, "since here no fishermen ever come," and she checked her horse as though to turn. "Whether they come or not, certainly they have gone," said Godwin, craning forward to look about him. "So, as we have nothing to fear from an empty boat, let us push on." On they rode accordingly until they came to the root of the stone quay or pier, when a sound behind them caused them to look back. Then they saw a sight that sent the blood to their hearts, for there behind them, leaping down one by one onto that narrow footway, were men armed with naked swords, 6 or 8 of them, all of whom, they noted, had strips of linen pierced with eyelet holes tied beneath their helms or leather caps so as to conceal their faces. "A snare! A snare!" cried Wulf, drawing his sword. "Swift, follow me up the Bradwell path." And he struck the spurs into his horse. It bounded forward to be dragged next second with all the weight of his powerful arm almost to its haunches. "God's mercy!" he cried. "There are more of them." And more there were, for another band of men, armed and linen-hooded like the first, had leapt down onto that Bradwell path, amongst them a stout man who seemed to be unarmed, except for a long, crooked knife at his girdle, and a coat of ringed mail, which showed through the opening of his loose tunic. "To the boat!" shouted Godwin, whereat the stout man laughed, a light, penetrating laugh, which even then all three of them heard and noted. Along the quay they rode, since there was nowhere else that they could go. with both paths barred, and swamp and water on one side of them, and a steep wooded bank upon the other. When they reached it, they found why the man had laughed, for the boat was made fast with a strong chain that could not be cut. More, her sail and oars were gone. "Get into it," mocked a voice, "or at least let the lady get in. It will save us the trouble of carrying her there." Now Rosamund turned very pale, while the face of Wulf went red and white, and he gripped his sword hilt. But Godwin, calm as ever, rode forward a few paces and said quietly, "Of your courtesy, say what you need of us. If it be money, we have none, nothing but our arms and horses, which I think may cost you dear." Now the man with the crooked knife advanced a little, accompanied by another man, a tall, supple-looking knave, into whose ear he whispered. "My master says," answered the tall man, "that you have with you that which is of more value than all the king's gold. A very fair lady of whom someone has urgent need. Give her up now and go your way with your arms and horses, for you are gallant young men, whose blood we do not wish to shed." At this it was the turn of the brethren to laugh, which both of them did together. "Give her up," answered Godwin, "and go our ways dishonoured? Aye, with our breath, but not before. Who then has such urgent need of the lady Rosamund?" Again there was whispering between the pair. "My master says," was the answer, "he thinks that all who see her will have need of her, since such loveliness is rare. But if you wish a name, well, one comes into his mind, the name of the knight Lozelle." "The knight Lozelle," murmured Rosamund, turning even paler than before, as well she might. For this Lozelle was a powerful man and Essex born. He owned ships of whose doings upon the seas and in the East evil tales were told, and once had sought Rosamund's hand in marriage, but being rejected, uttered threats for which Godwin, as the elder of the twins, had fought and wounded him. Then he vanished, none knew where. "Is Sir Hugh Lozelle here, then?" asked Godwin, "masked like you common cowards? If so, I desire to meet him, to finish the work I began in the snow last Christmas 12 months." "Find that out if you can," answered the tall man. But Wulf said, speaking low between his clenched teeth, "Brother, I see but one chance. We must place Rosamund between us and charge them." The captain of the band seemed to read their thoughts, for again he whispered into the ear of his companion, who called out, "My master says that if you try to charge, you will be fools, since we shall stab and hamstring your horses, which are too good to waste, and take you quite easily as you fall. Come then, yield as you can do without shame, seeing there is no escape, and that two men, however brave, cannot stand against a crowd. He gives you 1 minute to surrender." Now Rosamund spoke for the first time. "My cousins," she said, "I pray you not to let me fall living into the hands of Sir Hugh Lozelle, or of yonder men, to be taken to what fate I know not. Let Godwin kill me, then, to save my honour, as but now he said he would to save my soul, and strive to cut your way through and live to avenge me." The brethren made no answer, only they looked at the water, and then at one another, and nodded. It was Godwin who spoke again, for now that it had come to this struggle for life and their lady, Wulf, whose tongue was commonly so ready, had grown strangely silent and fierce-faced also. "Listen, Rosamund, and do not turn your eyes," said Godwin. "There is but one chance for you, and Poor as it is, you must choose between it and capture, since we cannot kill you. The grey horse you ride is strong and true. Turn him now and spur into the water of Death Creek and swim it. It is broad, but the incoming tide will help you, and perchance you will not drown." Rosamund listened, and moved her head backwards towards the boat. Then Wulf spoke, few words and sharp. "Begone, girl. We guard the boat." She heard, and her dark eyes filled with tears, and her stately head sank for a moment almost to her horse's mane. "Oh, my knights, and would you die for me? Well, if God wills it, so it must be. But I swear that if you die, that no man shall be aught to me who have your memory. And if you live—" and she looked at them confusedly, then stopped. "Bless us and begone," said Godwin. So she blessed them in words low and holy, then of a sudden wheeled round the great grey horse, and striking the spur into its flank, drove straight at the deep water. A moment the stallion hung, then from the low quay end sprang out wide and clear. Deep it sank, but not for long, for presently its rider's head rose above the water, and regaining the saddle from which she had floated, Rosamund sat firm and headed the horse straight for the distant bank. Now a shout of wonderment went up from the women thieves, for this was a deed that they had never thought a girl would dare. But the brethren laughed as they saw that the grey swam well, and leaping from their saddles ran forward a few paces, 8 or 10, along the mole to where it was narrowest, as they went tearing their cloaks from their shoulders, and since they had none, throwing them over their left arms to serve as bucklers. The band cursed sullenly, only their captain gave an order to his spokesman, who cried aloud, "Cut them down into the boat. We shall take her before she reaches shore or drowns." For a moment they wavered, for the tall twin warriors who barred the way had eyes that told of wounds and death. Then with a rush they came, scrambling over the rough stones. But here the causeway was so narrow that while their strength lasted, 2 men were as good as 20, nor because of the mud and water could they be got at from either side. So after all it was but 2 to 2, and the brethren were the better 2. Their long swords flashed and smote, and when Wulf's was lifted again, once more it shone red as it had been when he tossed it high in the sunlight, and a man fell with a heavy splash into the water of the creek, and wallowed there till he died. Godwin's foe was down also, and, as it seemed, sped. Then, at a muttered word, not waiting to be attacked by others, the brethren sprang forward. The huddled mob in front of them saw them come, and shrank back, but before they had gone a yard, the swords were at work behind. They swore strange oaths, they caught their feet among the rocks and rolled upon their faces. In their confusion 3 of them were pushed into the water, where 2 sank in the mud and were drowned, the third only dragging himself ashore, while the rest made good their escape from the causeway. But 2 had been cut down, and 3 had fallen, for whom there was no escape. They strove to rise and fight, but the linen masks flapped about their eyes, so that their blows went wide, while the long swords of the brothers smote and smote again upon their helms and harness, as the hammers of smiths smite upon an anvil, until they rolled over silent and stirless. "Back," said Godwin, "for here the road is wide, and they will get behind us." So back they moved slowly, with their faces to the foe, stopping just in front of the first man whom Godwin had seemed to kill, and who lay face upwards with arms outstretched. "So far we have done well," said Wulf with a short laugh. "Are you hurt?" "Nay," answered his brother, "but do not boast till the battle is over, for many are left, and they will come on thus no more." Pray God they have no spears or bows." Then he turned and looked behind him, and there, far from the shore now, swam the grey horse steadily, and there upon its back sat Rosamund. Yes, and she had seen, since the horse must swim somewhat sideways with the tide, for look, she took the kerchief from her throat and waved it to them. Then the brethren knew that she was proud of their great deeds, and thanked the saints that they had lived to do even so much as this for her dear sake. Godwin was right. Although their leader commanded them in a stern voice, the band sank from the reach of those awful swords, and instead sought for stones to hurl at them. But here lay more mud than pebbles, and the rocks of which the causeway was built were too heavy for them to lift, so that they found but few, which, when thrown, either missed the brethren or did them little hurt. Now, after some while, the man called Master spoke through his lieutenant, and certain of them ran into the thorn thicket, and thence appeared again, bearing the long oars of the boat. "Their counsel is to batter us down with the oars. What shall we do now, brother?" asked Godwin. "What we can," answered Wulf. "It matters little if Rosamund is spared by the waters, for they will scarcely take her now, who must loose the boat and man it after we are dead." As he spoke, Wulf heard a sound behind him, and of a sudden Godwin threw up his arms and sank to his knees. Round he sprang, and there upon his feet stood that man whom they had thought dead, and in his hand a bloody sword. At him leapt Wulf, and so fierce were the blows he smote that the first severed his sword arm, and the second shore through cloak and mail deep into the thief's side, so that this time he fell, never to stir again. Then he looked at his brother and saw that the blood was running down his face and blinding him. "Save yourself, Wulf, for I am sped," murmured Godwin. "Nay, or you could not speak." And he cast his arm around him and kissed him on the brow. Then a thought came into his mind, and lifting Godwin as though he were a child, he ran back to where the horses stood and heaved him on to the saddle. "Hold fast," he cried, "by mane and pommel. Keep your mind and hold fast, and I will save you yet." Passing the reins over his left arm, Wulf leapt upon the back of his own horse and turned it. 10 seconds more, and the pirates, who were gathering with the oars, where the paths joined at the root of the causeway, saw the two great horses thundering down upon them. On one a sore wounded man, his bright hair dabbled with blood, his hands gripping mane and saddle, and on the other the warrior Wulf, with starting eyes and a face like the face of a flame, shaking his red sword, and for the second time that day shouting aloud, "A D'Arcy, a D'Arcy! Contre D'Arcy, contre mort!" They saw, they shouted, they massed themselves together and held up the oars to meet them. But Wulf spurred fiercely, and short as was the way, the heavy horses trained to tourney gathered their speed. Now they were on them, the oars were swept aside like reeds, all round them flashed the swords, and Wulf felt that he was hurt, he knew not where. But his sword flashed also. One blow, there was no time for more, yet the man beneath it sank like an empty sack. By St. Peter, they were through, and Godwin still swayed upon the saddle, and yonder, nearing the further shore, the grey horse with its burden still battled in the tide. They were through! They were through! While to Wulf's eyes the air swam red, and the earth seemed as though it rose up to meet them, and everywhere was flaming fire. But the shouts had died away behind them, and the only sound was the sound of the galloping of their horses' hoofs. Then that also grew faint and died away, and silence and darkness fell upon the mind of Wulf. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2 of The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades, by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Abigail Rasmussen in April 2012. Chapter 2. Sir Andrew Darcy. Godwin dreamed that he was dead, and that beneath him floated the world, a glowing ball, which he was borne to and fro through the blackness, stretched upon a couch of ebony. There were bright watchers by his couch also, watchers twain, and he knew them for his guardian angels, given him at birth. Moreover, now and again presences would come and question the watchers, who sat at his head and foot. One asked, "Has this soul sinned?" And the angel at his head answered, "It has sinned." Again the voice asked, "Did it die shriven of its sins?" The angel answered, "It died unshriven, red sword aloft, fighting a good fight." Fighting for the cross of Christ? Nay, fighting for a woman. "How shall such a one find mercy?" wailed the questioning voice, growing ever fainter, till it was lost far away. Now came another visitor. It was his father, the warrior sire whom he had never seen, who fell in Syria. Godwin knew him well, for the face was the face carven on the tomb in Stangate Church, and he wore the blood-red cross upon his mail, and the Darcy Death's head was on his shield, and in his hand shone a naked sword. "Is this the soul of my son?" he asked of the white-robed watchers. "If so, how died he?" Then the angel at his foot answered, "He died, red sword aloft, fighting a good fight." Fighting for the cross of Christ? Nay, fighting for a woman. Fighting for a woman's love who should have fallen in the holy war? Alas, poor son, alas! Poor son, alas, that we must part again forever. And his voice, too, passed away. Lo, a glory advanced through the blackness, and the angels at head and foot stood up and saluted with their flaming spears. "How died this child of God?" asked a voice, speaking out of the glory, a low and awful voice. "He died by the sword," answered the angel. "By the sword of the children of the enemy fighting in the war of heaven?" Then the angels were silent. "What has heaven to do with him, if he fought not for heaven?" asked the voice again. "Let him be spared," pleaded the guardians, "who was young and brave and knew not. Send him back to earth, there to retrieve his sins and be our charge once more." "So be it," said the voice. "Knight, live on, but live as a knight of heaven, if thou wouldest win heaven." "Must he then put the woman from him?" asked the angels. "It was not said," answered the voice, speaking from the glory. And all that wild vision vanished. Then a space of oblivion, and Godwin awoke to hear other voices around him, voices human, well-beloved, remembered, and to see a face bending over him, a face most human, most well-beloved, most remembered, that of his cousin Rosamund. He babbled some questions, but they brought him food and told him to sleep, so he slept. Thus it went on, waking and sleep, sleep and waking, till at length one morning he woke up truly in the little room that opened out of the solar or sitting place of the Hall of Steeple, where he and Wulf had slept since their uncle took them to his home as infants. More, on the trestle bed opposite to him, his leg and arm bandaged, and a crutch by his side, sat Wulf himself, somewhat paler and thinner than of yore, but the same jovial, careless, yet at times fierce-faced Wulf. "Do I still dream, my brother, or is it you indeed?" A happy smile spread upon the face of Wulf, for now he knew that Godwin was himself again. "Me, sure enough," he answered. "Dream folk don't have lame legs. They are the gifts of swords and men." "And Rosamund, what of Rosamund? Did the grey horse swim the creek? And how came we here? Tell me quick, I faint for news." "She shall tell you herself." And hobbling to the curtained door, he called, "Rosamund, nay, our cousin Rosamund, Godwin is himself again. Hear you, Godwin is himself again, and would speak with you." There was a swift rustle of robes and a sound of quick feet among the rushes that strewed the floor, and then Rosamund herself, lovely as ever, but all her stateliness forgot in joy. She saw him, the gaunt Godwin, sitting up upon the pallet, his grey eyes shining in the white and sunken face. For Godwin's eyes were grey, while Wulf's were blue, the only difference between them which a stranger would note, although, in truth, Wulf's lips were fuller than Godwin's, and his chin more marked. Also, he was a larger man. She saw him, and with a little cry of delight ran and cast her arms about him and kissed him on the brow. "Be careful," said Wulf roughly, turning his head aside, "or, Rosamund, you will loose the bandages and bring his trouble back again. He has had enough of blood-letting." "Then I will kiss him on the hand that saved me," she said, and did so. More she pressed that poor, pale hand against her heart. "Mine had something to do with that business also, but I don't remember that you kissed it, Rosamund. Well, I will kiss him too, and oh, God be praised, and the Holy Virgin, and the Holy Peter, and the Holy Chad, and all the other holy dead folk whose names I can't recall, who between them, with the help of Rosamund here, and the prayers of the Prior John and the brethren at Stangate, and of Matthew, the village priest, have given you back to us, my brother, my most beloved brother." And he hopped to the bedside, and throwing his long, sinewy arms about Godwin, embraced him again and again. "Be careful," said Rosamund dryly, "or, Wulf, you will disturb the bandages, and he has had enough of bloodletting." Then, before he could answer, which he seemed minded to do, there came the sound of a slow step, and swinging the curtain aside, a tall and noble-looking knight entered the little place. The man was old, but looked older than he was, for sorrow and sickness had wasted him. His snow-white hair hung upon his shoulders, his face was pale, and his features were pinched, but finely chiselled, and, notwithstanding the difference of their years, wonderfully like to those of the daughter Rosamund, for this was her father, the famous Lord Sir Andrew D'Arcy. Rosamund turned and bent the knee to him with a strange and Eastern grace, while Wulf bowed his head, and Godwin, since his neck was too stiff to stir, held up his hand in greeting. The old man looked at him, and there was pride in his eyes. "So you will live after all, my nephew," he said, "and for that I thank the Giver of life and death, since by God you are a gallant man, a worthy child of the bloods of the Norman D'Arcy and of Julian the Saxon. Yes, one of the best of them." "Speak not so, my uncle," said Godwin, "or at least here is a worthier," and he patted the hand of Wulf with his lean fingers. "It was Wulf who bore me through. Oh, I remember as much as that, how he lifted me on to the black horse, and bade me to cling fast to mane and pommel. Ay, and I remember the charge, and his cry of Counter D'Arcy, counter Mort, and the flashing of swords about us, and after that, nothing. Would that I had been there to help in that fight," said Sir Andrew D'Arcy, tossing his white hair. "Oh, my children, it is hard to be sick and old. A log am I, naught but a rotting log. Still, had I only known—" "Father, father," said Rosamund, casting her white arm about his neck, "you should not speak thus. You have done your share." "Yes, my share, but I should like to do more. Oh, Saint Andrew, ask it for me that I may die with sword aloft and my grandsire's cry upon my lips. Yes, yes, thus, not like a worn-out war-horse in his stall. There, pardon me, but in truth, my children, I am jealous of you. Why, when I found you lying in each other's arms, I could have wept for rage to think that such a fray had been within a league of my own doors, and I not in it." "I know nothing of all that story," said Godwin. "No, in truth, how can you, who have been senseless this month or more? But Rosamund knows, and she shall tell it you. Speak on, Rosamund. Lay you back, Godwin, and listen." "The tale is yours, my cousins, and not mine," said Rosamund. "You bade me take the water, and into it I spurred the grey horse, and we sank deep, so that the waves closed above my head. Then up we came, I floating from the saddle, but I regained it, and the horse answered to my voice and bridle, and swam out for the further shore. On it swam, somewhat slantwise with the tide, so that by turning my head I could see all that passed upon the mole. I saw them come at you, and men fall before your swords. I saw you charge them and run back again. Lastly, after what seemed a very long while, when I was far away, I saw Wulf lift Godwin into the saddle. I knew it must be Godwin, because he set him on the black horse, and the pair of you galloped down the quay and vanished. But then I was near the home shore, and the grey grew very weary and sank deep in the water, but I cheered it on with my voice, and although twice its head went beneath the waves, in the end it found a footing, though a soft one. After resting a while, it plunged forward with short rushes through the mud, and so at length came safe to land, where it stood, shaking with fear and weariness. So soon as the horse got its breath again, I pressed on, for I saw them loosing the boat, and came home here as the dark closed in, to meet your uncle watching for me at the gate. Now, father, do you take up the tale." "There is little more to tell," said Sir Andrew. "You will remember, nephews, that I was against this ride of Rosamund's to seek flowers, or I know not what, at St. Peter's shrine 9 miles away. But as the maid had set her heart on it, and there are but few pleasures here, why, I let her go, with the pair of you for escort. You will mind also that you were starting without your mail, and how foolish you thought me when I called you back and made you gird it on. Well, my patron saint, or yours, put it into my head to do so, for had it not been for those same shirts of mail, you were both of you dead men today. But that morning I had been thinking of Sir Hugh Lozelle, if such a false pirate rogue can be called a knight. Not but that he is stout and brave enough, and his threats after he recovered from the wound you gave him, Godwin, how that he would come back and take your cousin for all we could do to stay him. True, we heard that he had sailed for the East to war against Saladin, or with him, for he was ever a traitor. But even if this were so, men returned from the East. Therefore I bade you arm, having some foresight of what was to come, for doubtless this onslaught must have been planned by him." "I think so," said Wulf, "for, as Rosamund here knows, the tall knave who interrupted the foreigner whom he called his master gave us the name of the knight Lozelle as the man who sought to carry her off." "Was this master a Saracen?" asked Sir Andrew anxiously. "Nay, uncle, how can I tell, seeing that his face was masked like the rest, and he spoke through an interpreter? But I pray you go on with the story, which Godwin has not heard." "It is short. When Rosamund told her tale, of which I could make little, for the girl was crazed with grief and cold and fear, save that you had been attacked upon the old quay, and she had escaped by swimming Death Creek, which seemed a thing incredible, I got together what men I could. Then, bidding her stay behind, with some of them to guard her and nurse her, which she was loath to do, I set out to find you, or your bodies. It was dark, but we rode hard, having lanterns with us as we went, rousing men at every stead, until we came to where the roads join at Moats. There we found a black horse, your horse, Godwin, so badly wounded that he could travel no further, and I groaned, thinking that you were dead. Still we went on till we heard another horse whinny, and presently found the roan, also riderless, standing by the path side with his head down. 'A man on the ground holds him,' cried one, and I sprang from the saddle to see who it might be, to find that it was you, the pair of you, locked in each other's arms, and senseless, if not dead, as well you might be from your wounds. I bade the country folk cover you up and carry you home, and others to run to Stangate and pray the prior and the monk Stephen, who is a doctor, come at once to tend you, while we pressed onwards to take vengeance if we could. We reached the quay upon the creek, but there we found nothing save some bloodstains, and, this is strange, your sword, Godwin, the hilt set between two stones, and on the point a writing." "What was the writing?" asked Godwin. "Here it is," answered his uncle, drawing a piece of parchment from his robe. "Read it, one of you, since all you are scholars, and my eyes are bad." Rosamund took it and read what was written, hurriedly, but in a clerky hand and in the French tongue. It ran thus: "The sword of a brave man. Bury it with him if he be dead, and give it back to him if he lives, as I hope. My master would wish me to do this honour to a gallant foe, whom in that case he still may meet. Signed, Hugh Lozelle, or another." "Another, then, not Hugh Lozelle," said Godwin, "since he cannot write, and if he could, would never pen words so knightly." "The words may be knightly, but the writer's deeds were base enough," replied Sir Andrew. "Nor, in truth, do I understand this scroll." "The interpreter spoke of the short man as his master," suggested Wulf. "Aye, nephew, but him you met. This writing speaks of a master whom Godwin may meet, and who would wish the writer to pay him a certain honour." "Perhaps he wrote thus to blind us." "Perchance, perchance. The matter puzzles me. Moreover, of whom these men were, I have been able to learn nothing. A boat was seen passing towards Bradwell, indeed it seems that you saw it, and that night a boat was seen sailing southwards down St. Peter's Sand, towards a ship that had anchored off Foulness Point. But what that ship was, whence she came, and whither she went, none know, though the tidings of this fray have made some stir." "Well," said Wulf, "at least we have seen the last of her crew of women thieves. Had they meant more mischief, they would have shown themselves again ere now." Sir Andrew looked grave as he answered, "So I trust, but all the tale is very strange. How came they to know that you and Rosamund were riding that day to St. Peter's on the Wall, and so were able to waylay you? Surely some spy must have warned them, since that they were no common pirates is evident, for they spoke of Lozelle and bade you two begone unharmed, as it was Rosamund whom they needed. Also there is the matter of the sword that fell from the hand of Godwin when he was hurt, which was returned in so strange a fashion. I have known many such deeds of chivalry done in the East by Paynim men." "Well, Rosamund is half an Eastern," broke in Wulf carelessly, "and perhaps that had something to do with it all." Sir Andrew started, and the colour rose to his pale face. Then, in a tone in which he showed he wished to speak no more of this matter, he said, "Enough, enough. Godwin is very weak and grows weary, and before I leave him I have a word to say that it may please you both to hear. Young men, you are of my blood, the nearest to it except Rosamund, the sons of that noble knight, my brother. I have ever loved you well and been proud of you. But if this was so in the past, how much more is it thus today, when you have done such high service to my house? Moreover, that deed was brave and great. Nothing more knightly has been told of in Essex this many a year, and those who wrought it should no longer be simple gentlemen, but very knights. This boon it is in my power to grant to you according to the ancient custom. Still, that none may question it, while you lay sick, but after it was believed that Godwin would live, which at first we scarcely dared to hope, I journeyed to London and sought audience of our lord the king. Having told him this tale, I prayed him that he would be pleased to grant me his command in writing that I should name you knights. My nephews, he was so pleased, and here I have the brief sealed with the royal signet, commanding that in his name and my own I should give you the accolade publicly in the church of the priory at Stangate, at such season as may be convenient. Therefore, Godwin, the squire, haste you to get well, that you may become Sir Godwin the knight. For you, Wulf, save for the hurt to your leg, are well enough already." Now Godwin's face went red with pride, and Wulf dropped his bold eyes and looked modest as a girl. "Speak, you," he said to his brother, "for my tongue is blunt and awkward." "Sir," said Godwin in a weak voice, "we do not know how to thank you for so great an honour, that we never thought to win till we had done more famous deeds than the beating off of a band of robbers. Sir, we have no more to say, save that while we live we will strive to be worthy of our name and of you." "Well spoken," said his uncle, adding as though to himself, "This man is courtly as he is brave." Wulf looked up, a flash of merriment upon his open face. "I, my uncle, whose speech is, I fear me, not courtly, thank you also. I will add that I think our lady cousin here should be knighted too, if such a thing were possible for a woman, seeing that to swim a horse across Death Creek was a greater deed than to fight some rascals on its quay." "Rosamund," answered the old man in the same dreamy voice, "her rank is high enough, too high, far too high for safety." And turning, he left the little chamber. "Well, cousin," said Wulf, "if you cannot be a knight, at least you can lessen all this dangerous rank of yours by becoming a knight's wife." Whereat Rosamund looked at him with indignation, which struggled with a smile in her dark eyes, and murmuring that she must see to the making of Godwin's broth, followed her father from the place. "It would have been kinder had she told us that she was glad," said Wulf when she was gone. "Perhaps she would," answered his brother, "had it not been for your rough jests, Wulf, which might have a meaning in them." "Nay, I had no meaning. Why should she not become a knight's wife?" "Aye, but what knights? Would it please either of us, brother, if, as may well chance. He should be some stranger. Now Wulf swore a great oath, then flushed to the roots of his fair hair, and was silent. "Ah," said Godwin, "you do not think before you speak, which it is always well to do." "She swore upon the quay yonder," broke in Wulf. "Forget what she swore. Words uttered in such an hour should not be remembered against a maid." "God's truth, brother, you are right as ever. My tongue runs away with me, but still I can't put those words out of my mind, though which of us— Wulf? I mean to say that we are in fortune's path today, Godwin. Oh, that was a lucky ride! Such fighting as I have never seen or dreamed of. We won it too, and now both of us are alive, and a knighthood for each. Yes, both of us alive, thanks to you, Wulf. Nay, it is so, though you would never have done less. But as for fortune's path, it is one that has many rough turns, and perhaps before all is done she may lead us round some of them." "You talk like a priest, not like a squire who is to be knighted at the cost of a scar on his head. For my part, I will kiss fortune while I may, and if she jilts me afterwards—" "Wulf," called Rosamund from without the curtain, "cease talking of kissing at the top of your voice, I pray you, and leave Godwin to sleep, for he needs it." And she entered the little chamber, bearing a bowl of broth in her hand. Thereon, saying that ladies should not listen to what did not concern them, Wulf seized his crutch and hobbled from the place. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3 of The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades, by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Abigail Rasmussen in April 2012. Chapter 3. The Knighting of the Brethren. Another month had gone by, and though Godwin was still somewhat weak and suffered from a headache at times, the brethren had recovered from their wounds. On the last day of November, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a great procession might have been seen wending its way from the old hall at Steeple. In it rode many knights fully armed, before whom were borne their banners. These went first. Then came old Sir Andrew D'Arcy, also fully armed, attended by squires and retainers. He was accompanied by his lovely daughter, the Lady Rosamund, clad in beautiful apparel under her cloak of fur, who rode at his right hand on that same horse which had swum Death Creek. Next appeared the brethren, modestly arrayed as simple gentlemen, followed each of them by his squire, scions of the noble houses of Salcote and of Dengie. After them rode yet more knights, squires, tenants of various degree, and servants, surrounded by a great number of peasantry and villeins, who walked and ran with their womenfolk and children. Following the road through the village, the procession turned to the left at the great arch which marked the boundary of the monks' lands, and headed for Stangate Abbey, some 2 miles away, by the path that ran between the arable land and the salt marshes, which are flooded at high tide. At length they came to the stone gate of the abbey, that gave the place its name of Stangate. Here they were met by a company of the Cluniac monks, who dwelt in this wild and lonely spot upon the water's edge, headed by their prior, John Fitz-Brien. He was a venerable, white-haired man, clad in wide-sleeved black robes, and preceded by a priest carrying a silver cross. Now the procession separated, Godwin and Wulf, with certain of the knights and their esquires, being led to the priory, while the main body of it entered the church, or stood about outside its door. Arrived in the house, the 2 knights elect were taken to a room where their hair was cut and their chins were shaved by a barber who awaited them. Then, under the guidance of the two old knights named Sir Anthony de Mandeville and Sir Roger de Mercy, they were conducted to baths surrounded with rich cloths. Into these, having been undressed by the squires, they entered and bathed themselves, while Sir Anthony and Sir Roger spoke to them through the cloths of the high duties of their vocation, ending by pouring water over them and signing their bare bodies with the sign of the cross. Next they were dressed again, and preceded by minstrels led to the church, at the porch of which they and their esquires were given wine to drink. Here, in the presence of all the company, they were clothed first in white tunics, to signify the whiteness of their hearts, next in red robes, symbolical of the blood they might be called upon to shed for Christ, and lastly in long black cloaks, emblems of the death that must be endured by all. This done, their armour was brought in and piled before them upon the steps of the altar, and the congregation departed homeward, leaving them with their esquires and the priest to spend the long winter night in orisons and prayers. Long indeed it was in that lonesome, holy place, lit only by a lamp which swung before the altar. Wulf prayed and prayed until he could pray no more, then fell into a half-dreamful state that was haunted by the face of Rosamund, where even her face should have been forgotten. Godwin, his elbow resting against the tomb that hid his father's heart, prayed also until even his earnestness was outworn, and he began to wonder about many things. That dream of his, for instance, in his sickness, when he had seemed to be dead, and what might be the true duty of man. To be brave and upright? Surely. To fight for the cross of Christ against the Saracen? Surely, if the chance came his way. What more? To abandon the world and to spend his life muttering prayers like those priests in the darkness behind him? Could that be needful or of service to God or man? To man, perhaps, because such folk tended the sick and fed the poor. But to God? Was he not sent into the world to bear his part in the world, to live his full life? This would mean a half-life, one into which no woman might enter, to which no child might be added, since to monks, and even to certain brotherhoods, all these things, which nature decreed and heaven had sanctified, were deadly sin. It would mean, for instance, that he must think no more of Rosamund. Could he do this for the sake of the welfare of his soul in some future state? Why, at the thought of it even, in that solemn place and hour of dedication, his spirit reeled, for then and there, for the first time, it was borne in upon him that he loved this woman more than all the world beside, more than his life, more perhaps than his soul. He loved her with all his pure young heart, so much that it would be a joy to him to die for her, not only in the heat of battle, as lately had almost chanced on the Death Creek quay, but in cold blood of set purpose if there came need. He loved her with body and with spirit, and after God, here to her he consecrated his body and his spirit. But what value would she put upon the gift? What if some other man? By his side, his elbows resting on the altar rails, his eyes fixed upon the beaming armour that he would wear in battle, knelt Wulf, his brother, a mighty man, a knight of knights, fearless, noble, open-hearted, such a one as any woman might well love. And he also loved Rosamund. Of this Godwin was sure. And oh, did not Rosamund love Wulf? Bitter jealousy seized upon his vitals. Yes, even then and there black envy got hold of Godwin, and rent him so sore that, cold as was the place, the sweat poured from his brow and body. Should he abandon hope? Should he fly the battle for fear that he might be defeated? Nay, he would fight on in all honesty and honour, and if he were overcome, would meet his fate as a brave knight should, without bitterness, but without shame. Let destiny direct the matter. It was in the hands of destiny, and stretching out his arm, he threw it around the neck of his brother, who knelt beside him, and let it rest there, until the head of the weary Wulf sank sleepily upon his shoulder, like the head of an infant upon its mother's breast. "O Jesu," Godwin moaned in his poor heart, "give me strength to fight against this sinful passion that would lead me to hate the brother whom I love. O Jesu, give me strength to bear it if he should be preferred before me. Make me a perfect knight, strong to suffer and endure, and, if need be, to rejoice even in the joy of my supplanter." At length the grey dawn broke, and the sunlight passing through the eastern window like a golden spear pierced the dusk of the long church, which was built to the shape of a cross, so that only its transepts remained in shadow. Then came a sound of chanting, and at the western door entered the prior, wearing all his robes, attended by the monks and acolytes who swung censers. In the centre of the nave he halted and passed to the confessional, calling on Godwin to follow. So he went and knelt before the holy man, and there poured out all his heart. He confessed his sins. They were but few. He told him of the vision of his sickness, on which the prior pondered long, of his deep love, his hopes, his fears, and his desire to be a warrior who once, as a lad, had wished to be a monk, not that he might shed blood, but to fight for the cross of Christ against the Paynim, ending with a cry of, "Give me counsel, O my Father, give me counsel." "Your own heart is your best counsellor," was the priest's answer. "Go as it guides you, knowing that through it is God who guides. Nor fear that you will fail. But if love and the joys of life should leave you, then come back and we will talk again. Go on, pure knight of Christ, fear nothing, and sure of the reward, and take with you the blessing of Christ and of his church." "What penance must I bear, Father?" "Such souls as yours inflict their own penance. The saints forbid that I should add to it," was the gentle answer. Then, with a lightened heart, Godwin returned to the altar rails, while his brother Wulf was summoned to take his place in the confessional. Of the sins that he had to tell we need not speak. They were such as are common to young men, and none of them very grievous. Still, before he gave him absolution, the good prior admonished him to think less of his body and more of his spirit, less of the glory of feats of arms and more of the true ends to which he should enter on them. He bade him, moreover, to take his brother Godwin as an earthly guide and example, since there lived no better or wiser man of his years, and finally dismissed him, prophesying that if he would heed these counsels, he would come to great glory on earth and in heaven. "Father, I will do my best," answered Wulf humbly. "But there cannot be two Godwins. And, Father, sometimes I fear me that our paths will cross, since two men cannot win one woman." "I know the trouble," answered the prior anxiously, "and with less noble-natured men it might be grave. But if it should come to this, then must the lady judge according to the wishes of her own heart, and he who loses her must be loyal in sorrow as in joy. Be sure that you take no base advantage of your brother in the hour of temptation, and bear him no bitterness should he win the bride. I think I can be sure of that," said Wulf. "Also that we, who have loved each other from birth, would die before we betrayed each other." "I think so also," answered the prior, "but Satan is very strong." Then Wulf also returned to the altar rails, and the full mass was sung, and the sacrament received by the two neophytes, and the offerings made, all in their appointed order. Next they were led back to the priory to rest and eat a little after their long night's vigil in the cold church, and here they abode a while, thinking their own thoughts, seated alone in the prior's chamber. At length Wulf, who seemed to be ill at ease, rose and laid his hand upon his brother's shoulder, saying, "I can be silent no more. It was ever thus. That which is in my mind must out of it. I have words to say to you." "Speak on, Wulf," said Godwin. Wulf sat himself down again upon his stool, and for a while stared hard at nothing, for he did not seem to find it easy to begin this talk. Now Godwin could read his brother's mind like a book, but Wulf could not always read Godwin's, although being twins who had been together from birth, their hearts were for the most part open to each other without the need of words. "It is of our cousin Rosamund, is it not?" asked Godwin presently. "Aye, who else?" "And you would tell me that you love her, and that now you are a knight, almost, and hard on 25 years of age, you would ask her to become your affianced wife?" "Yes, Godwin, it came into my heart when she rode the grey horse into the water, there upon the pier, and I thought that I should never see her any more. I tell you, it came into my heart that life was not worth living, nor death worth dying without her." "Then, Wulf," answered Godwin slowly, "what more is there to say? Ask on, and prosper. Why not? We have some lands, if not many, and Rosamund will not lack for them. Nor do I think that our uncle would forbid you, if she wills it, seeing that you are the prosperoust man and the bravest in all this countryside." "Except my brother Godwin, who is all these things, and good and learned to boot, which I am not," replied Wulf musingly. Then there was silence for a while, which he broke. "Godwin, our ill luck is that you love her also, and that you thought the same thoughts which I did yonder on the quay head." Godwin flushed a little, and his long fingers tightened their grip upon his knee. "It is so," he said quietly. "To my grief it is so. But Rosamund knows nothing of this, and should never know it if you will keep a watch upon your tongue. Moreover, you need not be jealous of me before marriage or after." "What, then, would you have me do?" asked Wulf hotly. "Seek her heart, and perchance, though this I doubt, let her yield it to me, she thinking that you care not for her?" "Why not?" asked Godwin again, with a sigh. "It might save her some pain and you some doubt, and make my own path clearer. Marriage is more to you than to me, Wulf, who think sometimes that my sword should be my spouse and duty my only aim." "Who think, having a heart of gold, that even in such a thing as this you will not bar the path of the brother whom you love? Nay, Godwin, as I am a sinful man, and as I desire her above all things on earth, I will play no such coward's game, nor conquer one who will not lift his sword lest he should hurt me. Sooner would I bid you all farewell, and go to seek fortune or death in the wars, without word spoken." "Leaving Rosamund to pine, perchance. Oh, could we be sure that she had no mind toward either of us, that would be best, to be gone together. But, Wulf, we cannot be sure, since at times, to be honest, I have thought she loves you. And at times, to be honest, Godwin, I have been sure that she loves you, although I should like to try my luck and hear it from her lips, which on such terms I will not do. What, then, is your plan, Wulf?" My plan is that if our uncle gives us leave, we should both speak to her, you first as the elder, setting out your case as best you can, and asking her to think of it, and give you your answer within a day. Then, before that day is done, I also should speak, so that she may know all the story, and play her part in it with opened eyes, not deeming, as otherwise she might, that we know each other's minds, and that you ask because I have no will that way." "It is very fair," replied Godwin, "and worthy of you, who are the most honest of men. Yet, Wulf, I am troubled. See you, my brother, have ever brethren loved each other as we do? And now must the shadow of a woman fall upon and blight that love which is so fair and precious?" "Why so?" asked Wulf. "Come, Godwin, let us make a pact that it shall not be thus, and keep it by the help of heaven. Let us show the world that two men can love one woman and still love each other, not knowing as yet which of them she will choose, if indeed she chooses either. For, Godwin, we are not the only gentlemen whose eyes have turned, or yet may turn, towards the high-born, rich, and lovely lady Rosamund. Is it your will that we should make such a pact?" Godwin thought a little, then answered, "Yes, but if so, it must be one so strong that for her sake, for both our sakes, we cannot break it, and live with honour." "So be it," said Wulf. "This is man's work, not child's make-believe." Then Godwin rose, and going to the door, bade his squire, who watched without, pray the Prior John to come to them, as they sought his counsel in a matter. So he came, and standing before him with downcast head, Godwin told him all the tale, which indeed he who knew so much already was quick to understand, and of their purpose also, while at a question from the Prior, Wulf answered that it was well and truly said, nothing having been kept back. Then they asked him if it was lawful that they should take such an oath, to which he replied that he thought it not only lawful, but very good. So in the end, kneeling together hand in hand before the rood that stood in the chamber, they repeated this oath after him, both of them together. "We, brethren, Godwin and Wulf D'Arcy, do swear by the Holy Cross of Christ, and by the patron saint of this place, Saint Mary Magdalene, and our own patron saints, Saint Peter and Saint Chad, standing in the presence of God, of our guardian angels, and of you, John, that being both of us enamoured of our cousin Rosamund D'Arcy, we will ask her to wife in the manner we have agreed, and no other. That we will abide by her decision, should she choose either of us, nor seek to alter it by tempting her from her troth, or in any fashion, overt or covert. That he of us whom she refuses will thenceforth be a brother to her and no more, however Satan may tempt his heart otherwise. That so far as may be possible to us, who are but sinful men, we will suffer neither bitterness nor jealousy to come between our love because of this woman, and that in war or peace we will remain faithful comrades and brethren. Thus we swear with a true heart and purpose, and in token thereof, knowing that he who breaks this oath will be a knight dishonoured, and a vessel fit for the wrath of God. We kiss this rood and one another." This, then, these brethren said and did, and with light minds and joyful faces received the blessing of the Prior, who had christened them in infancy, and went down to meet the great company that had ridden forth to lead them back to Steeple, where their knighting should be done. So to Steeple, preceded by the squires, who rode before them, bareheaded, carrying their swords by the scabbarded points, with their gold spurs hanging from the hilts, they came at last. Here the hall was set for a great feast, a space having been left between the tables and the dais, to which the brethren were conducted. Then came forward Sir Anthony de Mandeville and Sir Roger de Mercy in full armour, and presented to Sir Andrew D'Arcy, their uncle, who stood upon the edge of the dais. Also in his armour their swords and spurs, of which he gave back to them two of the latter, bidding them affix these upon the candidates' right heels. This done, the Prior John blessed the swords, after which Sir Andrew girded them about the waists of his nephews, saying, "Take ye back the swords that you have used so well." Next he drew his own silver-hilted blade that had been his father's and his grandfather's, and whilst they knelt before him, smote each of them 3 blows upon the right shoulder, crying with a loud voice, "In the name of God, Saint Michael and Saint George, I knight ye. Be ye good knights." Thereafter came forward Rosamund as their nearest kinswoman, and helped by other ladies, clad upon them their hauberks or coats of mail, their helms of steel, and their kite-shaped shields emblazoned with a skull, the cognizance of their race. This done, with the musicians marching before them, they walked to Steeple Church, a distance of 200 paces from the hall, where they laid their swords upon the altar and took them up again, swearing to be good servants of Christ and defenders of the Church. As they left its doors, who should meet them but the cook, carrying his chopper in his hand, and claiming as his fee the value of the spurs they wore, crying aloud at the same time, "If either of you young knights should do aught in despite of your honour and of the oaths that you have sworn, from which may God and his saints prevent you, then with my chopper will I hack these spurs from off your heels." Thus at last the long ceremony was ended, and after it came a very great feast, for at the high table were entertained many noble knights and ladies, and below in the hall their squires and other gentlemen, and outside all yeomanry and villagers, whilst the children and the aged had food and drink given to them in the nave of the church itself. When the eating at length was done, the centre of the hall was cleared, and while men drank, the minstrels made music. All were very merry with wine and strong ale, and talk arose among them as to which of these brethren, Sir Godwin or Sir Wulf, was the more brave, the more handsome, and the more learned and courteous. Now a knight, it was Sir Cirian de Salcote, seeing that the argument grew hot and might lead to blows, rose and declared that this should be decided by beauty alone, and that none could be more fitted to judge than the fair lady whom the two of them had saved from woman thieves at the Death Creek quay. They all called, "Aye, let her settle it," and it was agreed that she would give the kerchief from her neck to the bravest, a beaker of wine to the handsomest, and a book of hours to the most learned. So, seeing no help for it, since, except her father, the brethren, the most of the other ladies and herself, who drank but water, gentle and simple like, had begun to grow heated with wine, and were very urgent, Rosamund took the silk kerchief from her neck. Then, coming to the edge of the dais, where they were seated in the sight of all, she stood before her cousins, not knowing, poor maid, to which of them she should offer it. But Godwin whispered a word to Wulf, and both of them, stretching out their right hands, snatched an end of the kerchief which she held towards them, and rending it, twisted the severed halves round their sword hilts. The company laughed at their wit, and cried, "The wine for the more handsome! They cannot serve that thus." Rosamund thought a moment. Then she lifted a great silver beaker, the largest on the board, and having filled it full of wine, once more came forward and held it before them, as though pondering. Thereon the brethren, as though by a single movement, bent forward, and each of them touched the beaker with his lips. Again a great laugh went up, and even Rosamund smiled. "The book! The book!" cried the guests. "They dare not rend the holy book." So, for the third time, Rosamund advanced, bearing the missal. "Knights," she said, You have torn my kerchief and drunk my wine. Now I offer this hallowed writing to him who can read it best." "Give it to Godwin," said Wulf. "I am a swordsman, not a clerk." "Well said, well said," roared the company. "The sword for us, not the pen." But Rosamund turned on them and answered: "He who wields sword is brave, and he who wields pen is wise. But better is he who can handle both sword and pen, like my cousin Godwin, the brave and learned." "Hear her! Hear her!" cried the revellers, knocking their horns upon the board, while in the silence that followed a woman's voice said, "Sir Godwin's luck is great, but give me Sir Wulf's strong arms." Then the drinking began again, and Rosamund and the ladies slipped away, as well they might, for the times were rough and coarse. On the morrow, after most of the guests were gone, many of them with aching heads, Godwin and Wulf sought their uncle, Sir Andrew, in the solar where he sat alone, for they knew Rosamund had walked to the church hard by with two of the serving women to make it ready for the Friday's Mass, after the feast of the peasants that had been held in the nave. Coming to his oaken chair by the open hearth which had a chimney to it, no common things in those days, they knelt before him. "What is it now, my nephews?" asked the old man, smiling. "Do you wish that I should knight you afresh?" "No, sir," answered Godwin. "We seek a greater boon." "Then you seek in vain, for there is none." "Another sort of boon," broke in Wulf. Sir Andrew pulled his beard and looked at them. Perhaps the Prior John had spoken a word to him, and he guessed what was coming. "Speak," he said to Godwin. "The gift is great that I would not give to either of you if it be within my power." "Sir," said Godwin, "we seek the leave to ask your daughter's hand in marriage." "What? The two of you?" "Yes, sir, the two of us." Then Sir Andrew, who seldom laughed, laughed outright. "Truly," he said, "of all the strange things I have known this is the strangest, that two knights should ask one wife between them." "It seems strange, sir, but when you have heard our tale you will understand." So he listened while they told him all that had passed between them and of the solemn oath which they had sworn. "Noble in this, as in other things," commented Sir Andrew when they had done, "but I fear that one of you may find that vow hard to keep. By all the saints, nephews, you were right when you said that you asked a great boon. Do you know, although I have told you nothing of it, that, not to speak of the knave Lozelle, already two of the greatest men in this land have sought my daughter Rosamund in marriage?" "It may well be so," said Wulf. "It is so, and now I will tell you why one or other of the pair is not her husband, which in some ways I would he were. A simple reason. I asked her, and she had no mind to either, and as her mother married where her heart was, so I have sworn that the daughter should do, or not at all. For better a nunnery than a loveless bridal. Now let us see what you have to give. You are of good blood, that of Julian by your mother, and mine also on one side her own. As squires to your sponsors of yesterday, the knights Sir Anthony de Mandeville and Sir Roger de Mercy, you bore yourselves bravely in the Scottish war. Indeed, your liege King Henry remembered it, and that is why he granted my prayer so readily. Since then, although you loved the life little, because I asked it of you, you have rested here at home with me, and done no feats of arms, save that great one of 2 months gone, which made you knights, and, in truth, gives you some claim on Rosamund. For the rest, your father being the younger son, your lands are small, and you have no other gear. Outside the borders of this shire you are unknown men, with all your deeds to do, for I will not count those Scottish battles when you were but boys. And she whom you ask is one of the fairest and noblest and most learned ladies in this land, for I, who have some skill in such things, have taught her myself from childhood. Moreover, as I have no other heir, she will be wealthy. Well, what more have you to offer for all this?" "Ourselves," answered Wulf boldly. "We are true knights of whom you know the best and worst, and we love her. We learned it for once and for all on Death Creek quay, for till then she was our sister and no more." "Ay," added Godwin, "when she swore herself to us and blessed us, then light broke on both." "Stand up," said Sir Andrew, "and let me look at you." So they stood side by side in the full light of the blazing fire, for little other came through those narrow windows. "Proper men, said the old knight, "and as like to one another as two grains of wheat from the same sample. 6 feet high, each of you, and broad-chested, though Wulf is larger made and the stronger of the two. Brown and waving-haired both, save for that line of white where the sword hit yours, Godwin. Godwin with grey eyes that dream, and Wulf with the blue eyes that shine like swords. Ah, your grandsire had eyes like that, Wulf, and I have been told that when he leapt from the tower to the wall at the taking of Jerusalem, the Saracens did not love the light which shone in them, nor, in faith, did I, his son, when he was angry. Proper men, the pair of you, but Sir Wulf most warrior-like, and Sir Godwin most courtly. Now which do you think would please a woman most?" "That, sir, depends upon the woman," answered Godwin, and straightway his eyes began to dream. "That, sir, we seek to learn before the day is out, if you give us leave," added Wulf, "though if you would know, I think my chance a poor one." "Ah, well, it is a very pretty riddle, but I do not envy her who has its answering, for it might well trouble a maid's mind. Neither is it certain when all is done that she will guess best for her own peace. Would it not be wiser, then, that I should forbid them to ask this riddle?" he added as though to himself, and fell to thinking while they trembled, seeing that he was minded to refuse their suit. At length he looked up again and said, "Nay, let it go as God wills, who holds the future in his hand. Nephews, because you are good knights and true, either of whom would ward her well, and she may need warding. Because you are my only brother's sons, whom I have promised him to care for, and most of all because I love you both with an equal love, have your wish, and go try your fortunes at the hands of my daughter Rosamund in the fashion you have agreed. Godwin the elder first, as is his right, then Wulf. Nay, no thanks, but go swiftly, for I, whose hours are short, wish to learn the answer to this riddle." So they bowed and went, walking side by side. At the door of the hall Wulf stopped and said, "Rosamund is in the church. Seek her there, and, oh, I would that I could wish you good fortune, but Godwin, I cannot. I fear me that this may be the edge of that shadow of woman's love whereof you spoke, falling cold upon my heart." "There is no shadow. There is light now and always, as we have sworn that it should be," answered Godwin. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades, by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Abigail Rasmussen in April 2012. Chapter 4. The Letter of Saladin. 'Twas past 3 in the afternoon, and snow clouds were fast covering up the last grey gleam of the December day, as Godwin, wishing that his road was longer, walked to Steeple Church across the meadow. At the door of it he met the two serving women coming out with brooms in their hands, and bearing between them a great basket filled with broken meats and foul rushes. Of them he asked if the lady Rosamund were still in the church, to which they answered, curtseying, "Yes, Sir Godwin, and she bade us desire of you that you would come to lead her to the hall when she had finished making her prayers before the altar." "I wonder," mused Godwin, "whether I shall ever lead her from the altar to the hall, or whether I shall bide alone by the altar." Still, he thought it a good omen that she had bidden him thus, though some might have read it otherwise. Godwin entered the church, walking softly on the rushes with which its nave was strewn, and by the light of the lamp that burnt there always, saw Rosamund kneeling before a little shrine, her gracious head bowed upon her hands, praying earnestly. Of what? He wondered. Of what? Still she did not hear him. So, coming into the chancel, he stood behind her and waited patiently. At length, with a deep sigh, Rosamund rose from her knees and turned, and he noted by the light of the lamp that there were tear stains upon her face. Perhaps she, too, had spoken with the Prior John, who was her confessor also. Who knows? At the least, when her eyes fell upon Godwin standing like a statue before her, she started, and there broke from her lips the words, "Oh, how swift an answer!" Then, recovering herself, added, "To my message, I mean, cousin." "I met the woman at the door," he said. "It is kind of you to come," Rosamund went on, "but in truth, since that day on Death Creek, I fear to walk a bow shot's length alone or in the company of women only. With you I feel safe." "Or with Wulf?" "Yes, or with Wulf," she repeated. "That is, when he is not thinking of wars and adventures far away." By now they had reached the porch of the church, to find that the snow was falling fast. "Let us bide here a minute," he said. "It is but a passing cloud." So they stayed there in the gloom, and for a while there was silence between them. Then he spoke. "Rosamund, my cousin and lady, I come to put a question to you, but first, why you will understand afterwards, it is my duty to ask that you will give me no answer to that question until a full day has passed." "Surely, Godwin, that is easy to promise. But what is this wonderful question which may not be answered?" "One short and simple. Will you give yourself to me in marriage, Rosamund?" She leaned back against the wall of the porch. "My father—" she began. "Rosamund, I have his leave." "How can I answer, since you yourself forbid me?" "Till this time tomorrow only. Meanwhile, I pray you hear me, Rosamund. I am your cousin, and we were brought up together. Indeed, except when I was away at the Scottish war, we have never been apart. Therefore we know each other as well as anyone can who are not wedded. Therefore, too, you will know that I have always loved you, first as a brother loves his sister, and now as a man loves a woman." "Nay, Godwin, I knew it not. Indeed, I thought that, as it used to be, your heart was otherwhere." "Otherwhere? What lady?" "Nay, no lady, but in your dreams." "Dreams? Dreams of what?" "I cannot say. Perchance of things that are not here, things higher than the person of a poor maid." "Cousin, in part you are right, for it is not only the maid whom I love, but her spirit also. Oh, in truth, you are to me a dream, a symbol of all that is noble, high, and pure. In you and through you, Rosamund, I worship the heaven I hope to share with you." "A dream, a symbol, heaven! Are not these glittering garments to hang about a woman's shape? Why, when the truth came out, you would find her but a skull and jewelled mask, and learn to loathe her for a deceit that was not her own but yours. Godwin, such trappings as your imagination pictures could only fit an angel's face." They fit a face that would become an angel's." "An angel's? How know you? I am half an Eastern. The blood runs warm in me at times. I too have my thoughts and visions. I think that I love power and imagery and the delights of life, a different life from this. Are you sure, Godwin, that this poor face will be an angel's?" "I wish I were as sure of other things. At least I'll risk it." "Think of your soul, Godwin. It might be tarnished. You would not risk that for me, would you?" He thought, then answered, "No, since your soul is a part of mine, and I would not risk yours, Rosamund." "I like you for that answer," she said. "Yes, more than all you have said before, because I know that it is true. Indeed, you are an honourable knight, and I am proud, very proud, that you should love me, though perhaps it would have been better otherwise." And ever so little she bent the knee to him. "Whatever chances in life or death, those words will make me happy, Rosamund." Suddenly she caught his arm. "Whatever chances? Ah, what is about to chance? Great things, I think, for you and Wulf and me. Remember, I am half an Eastern, and we children of the East can feel the shadow of the future before it lays its hands upon us and becomes the present. I fear it, Godwin. I tell you that I fear it." "Fear it not, Rosamund. Why should you fear? On God's knees lies the scroll of our lives and of his purposes. The words we see and the words we guess may be terrible, but he who wrote it knows the end of the scroll, and that it is good. Do not fear, therefore, but read on with an untroubled heart, taking no thought for the morrow." She looked at him wonderingly, and asked, "Are these the words of a wooer, or of a saint in wooer's weeds? I know not, and do you know yourself? But you say you love me, and that you would wed me, and I believe it. Also that the woman whom Godwin weds will be fortunate, since such men are rare. But I am forbid to answer till tomorrow. Well, then I will answer as I am given grace. So till then be what you are of old, and the snow has ceased. Guide me home, my cousin Godwin." So home they went through the darkness and the cold, moaning wind, speaking no word, and entered the wide hall, where a great fire built in its centre roared upwards towards an opening in the roof, whence the smoke escaped, looking very pleasant and cheerful after the winter night without. There, standing in front of the fire, also pleasant and cheerful to behold, although his brow seemed somewhat puckered, was Wulf. At the sight of him, Godwin turned back through the great door, and having, as it were, stood for one moment in the light, vanished again into the darkness, closing the door behind him. But Rosamund walked on towards the fire. "You seem cold, cousin," said Wulf, studying her. "Godwin has kept you too long to pray with him in church. Well, it is his custom, for which I myself have suffered. Be seated on this settle and warm yourself." She obeyed without a word, and opening her fur cloak, stretched out her hands towards the flame, which played upon her dark and lovely face. Wulf looked around him. The hall was empty. Then he looked at Rosamund. "I am glad to find this chance of speaking with you alone, cousin, since I have a question to ask of you, but I must pray of you to give me no answer to it until 24 hours be past." "Agreed," she said. "I have given one such promise. Let it serve for both. Now for your question." "Ah," replied Wulf cheerfully, "I am glad that Godwin went first, since it saves me words, at which he is better than I am." "I do not know that, Wulf. At least, you have more of them," answered Rosamund with a little smile. "More, perhaps, but of a different quality. That is what you mean. Well, happily here mere words are not in question." "What then are in question, Wulf?" "Hearts, your heart and my heart, and I suppose Godwin's heart, if he has one, in that way." "Why should not Godwin have a heart?" "Why? Well, you see just now it is my business to belittle Godwin. Therefore I declare, which you, who know more about it, can believe or not as it pleases you, that Godwin's heart is like that of the old saint in the reliquary at Stangate, a thing which may have beaten once, and will perhaps beat again in heaven, but now is somewhat dead to this world." Rosamund smiled, and thought to herself that this dead heart had shown signs of life not long ago. But aloud she said, "If you have no more words to say to me of Godwin's heart, I will be gone to read with my father, who waits for me." "Nay, I have much more to say of my own." Then suddenly Wulf became very earnest, so earnest that his great frame shook, and when he strove to speak he could but stammer. At length it all came forth in a flood of burning words. "I love you, Rosamund. I love you, all of you, as I have ever loved you, though I did not know it till the other day, that of the fight, and ever shall love you, and I seek you for my wife. I know that I am only a rough soldier man, full of faults, not holy and learned like Godwin. Yet I swear that I would be a true knight to you all my life, and if the saints give me grace and strength, do great deeds in your honour and watch you well. Oh, what more is there to say?" "Nothing, Wulf," answered Rosamund, lifting her downcast eyes. "You do not wish that I should answer you, so I will thank you. Yes, from my heart, though in truth I am grieved that we can be no more brother and sister as we have been this many a year, and be going." "Nay, Rosamund, not yet. Although you may not speak, surely you might give me some little sign, who am in torment and thus must stay until this time tomorrow. For instance, you might let me kiss your hand. The pact said nothing about kissing." "I know naught of this pact, Wulf," answered Rosamund sternly, although a smile crept about the corners of her mouth. "But I do know that I shall not suffer you to touch my hand." "Then I will kiss your robe," and seizing a corner of her cloak he pressed it to his lips. "You are strong, and I am weak, Wulf, and cannot wrench my garment from you, but I tell you that this play advantages you nothing." He let the cloak fall. "Your pardon. I should have remembered that Godwin would never have presumed so far." "Godwin," she said, tapping her foot upon the ground, "if he gave a promise, would keep it in the spirit as well as in the letter." "I suppose so. See what it is for an erring man to have a saint for a brother and a rival. Nay, do not be angry with me, Rosamund, who cannot tread the path of saints." "That I believe, but at least, Wulf, there is no need to mock those who can." "I mock him not. I love him as well as you do," and he watched her face. It never changed, for in Rosamund's heart were hid the secret strength and silence of the East, which can throw a mask impenetrable over face and features. "I am glad that you love him, Wulf. See to it that you never forget your love and duty." "I will, yes, even if you reject me for him." "Those are honest words, such as I looked to hear you speak," she replied in a gentle voice. "And now, dear Wulf, farewell, for I am weary. Tomorrow—" he broke in. "Aye," she answered in a heavy voice, "tomorrow I must speak, and you must listen." The sun had run his course again, and once more it was near 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The brethren stood by the great fire in the hall, looking at each other doubtfully, as indeed they had looked through all the long hours of the night, during which neither of them had closed an eye. "It is time," said Wulf, and Godwin nodded. As he spoke a woman was seen descending from the solar, and they knew her errand. "Which?" asked Wulf, but Godwin shook his head. "Sir Andrew bids me say that he would speak with you both," said the woman, and went her way. "By the saints, I believe it's neither," exclaimed Wulf with a little laugh. "It may be thus," said Godwin, "and perhaps that would be best for all." "I don't think so," answered Wulf, as he followed him up the steps of the solar. Now they had passed the passage and closed the door, and before them was Sir Andrew, seated in his chair by the fire, but not alone, for at his side, her hand resting upon his shoulder, stood Rosamund. They noted that she was clad in her richest robes, and a bitter thought came into their minds that this might be to show them how beautiful was the woman whom both of them must lose. As they advanced, they bowed first to her and then to their uncle. While lifting her eyes from the ground, she smiled a little in greeting. "Speak, Rosamund," said her father. "These knights are in doubt and pain." "Now for the coup de grace," muttered Wulf. "My cousins," began Rosamund in a low, quiet voice, as though she were saying a lesson, "as to the matter of which you spoke to me yesterday, I have taken counsel with my father and with my own heart. You did me great honour, both of you, in asking me to be the wife of such worthy knights, with whom I have been brought up, and have loved since childhood as a sister loves her brothers. I will be brief as I may. Alas, I can give to neither of you the answer which you wish." "Coup de grace indeed," muttered Wulf. "Through hauberk, gambeson, and shirt right home to the heart." But Godwin only turned a trifle paler and said nothing. Now there was a silence for a little space, while from beneath his bushy eyebrows the old knight watched their faces, on which the light of the tapers fell. Then Godwin spoke. "We thank you, cousin. Come, Wulf, we have our answer. Let us be going." "Not all of it," broke in Rosamund hastily, and they seemed to breathe again. "Listen," she said, "for if it pleases you, I am willing to make a promise which my father has approved. Come to me this time 2 years, and if we all three live, should both of you still wish for me to wife, that there may be no further space of pain or waiting, I will name the man whom I shall choose and marry him at once." "And if one of us is dead?" asked Godwin. "Then," replied Rosamund, "if his name be untarnished, and he has done no deed that is not knightly, will forthwith wed the other." "Pardon me," broke in Wulf. She held up her hand and stopped him, saying, "You think this a strange saying, and so, perhaps, it is, but the matter is also strange, and for me the case is hard. Remember, all my life is at stake, and I may desire more time wherein to make my choice, that between two such men no maiden would find easy. We are all of us still young for marriage, for which, if God guards our lives, there will be time and to spare. Also in 2 years I may learn which of you is in truth the worthier knight, who today both seem so worthy." "Then is neither of us more to you than the other?" asked Wulf outright. Rosamund turned red, and her bosom heaved as she replied, "I will not answer that question." "And Wulf should not have asked it," said Godwin. "Brother, I read Rosamund's saying thus: between us she finds not much to choose, or if she does in her secret heart, out of her kindness, since she is determined not to marry for a while, she will not suffer us to see it and thereby bring grief on one of us. So she says, go forth, you knights, and do deeds worthy of such a lady, and perchance he who does the highest deeds shall receive the great reward. For my part, I find this judgment wise and just, and I am content to abide its issue. Nay, I am even glad of it, since it gives us time and opportunity to show our sweet cousin here, and all our fellows, the metal whereof we are made, and strive to outshine each other in the achievement of great feats, which, as always, we shall attempt side by side." "Well spoken," said Sir Andrew. "And you, Wulf?" Then Wulf, feeling that Rosamund was watching his face beneath the shadow of her long eyelashes, answered, "Before Heaven, I am content also, for whatever may be said against it. Now, at least, there will be 2 years of war in which one or both of us well may fall, and for that while at least no woman can come between our brotherhood. Uncle, I crave your leave to go serve my liege in Normandy." "And I also," said Godwin. "In the spring," replied Sir Andrew hastily, "when King Henry moves his power. Meanwhile, bide you here in all good fellowship, for who knows, much may happen between now and then, and perhaps your strong arms will be needed as they were not long ago. Moreover, I look to all three of you to hear no more of this talk of love and marriage, which in truth disturbs my mind and house. For good or ill, the matter is now settled for 2 years to come, by which time it is likely I shall be in my grave and beyond all troubling. I do not say that things have gone altogether as I could have wished, but they are as Rosamund wishes, and that is enough for me. On which of you she looks with the more favour I do not know, and be you content to remain in ignorance of what a father does not think it wise to seek to learn. A maid's heart is her own, and her future lies in the hand of God and his saints. Where let it bide, say I. Now we have done with all this business. Rosamund, dismiss your knights, and be you all three brothers and sister once more till this time 2 years, when those who live will find an answer to the riddle." So Rosamund came forward, and without a word gave her right hand to Godwin and her left to Wulf, and suffered that they should press their lips upon them. So for a while this was the end of their asking of her in marriage. The brethren left the solar side by side as they had come into it, but changed men in a sense, for now their lives were afire with a great purpose which bade them dare and do and win. Yet they were lighter hearted than when they entered there, since at least neither had been scorned, while both had hope and all the future, which the young so seldom fear, lay before them. As they descended the steps, their eyes fell upon the figure of a tall man clad in a pilgrim's cape, hood, and low-crowned hat, of which the front was bent upwards and laced, who carried in his hand a palmer's staff, and about his waist the scrip and water bottle. "What do you seek, holy palmer?" asked Godwin, coming towards him. "A night's lodging in my uncle's house?" The man bowed, then fixing on him a pair of bead-like brown eyes, which reminded Godwin of some he had seen, he knew not when or where, answered in the humble voice affected by his class, "Even so, most noble knight, shelter for man and beast, for my mule is held without. Also a word with the Lord Sir Andrew D'Arcy, for whom I have a message." "A mule?" said Wulf. "I thought that palmers always went afoot." "True, Sir Knight, but as it chances I have baggage, nay, not my own, whose earthly gear is all upon my back, but a chest that contains I know not what, which I am charged to deliver to Sir Andrew D'Arcy, the owner of this hall, or should he be dead, then to the lady Rosamund, his daughter." "Charged? By whom?" asked Wulf. "That, sir," said the palmer, bowing, "I will tell to Sir Andrew, who, I understand, still lives. Have I your leave to bring in the chest? And if so, will one of your servants help me, for it is heavy?" "We will help you," said Godwin, and they went with him into the courtyard, where by the scant light of the stars they saw a fine mule in charge of one of the serving men, and bound upon its back a long-shaped package sewn over with sacking. This the palmer unloosed, and taking one end, while Wulf, after bidding the man stable the mule, took the other, they bore it into the hall, Godwin going before them to summon his uncle. Presently he came, and the palmer bowed to him. "What is your name, palmer, and whence is this box?" asked the old knight, looking at him keenly. "My name, Sir Andrew, is Nicholas of Salisbury, and as to who sent me, with your leave I will whisper in your ear." And leaning forward he did so. Sir Andrew heard and staggered back as though a dart had pierced him. "What?" he said. "Are you a holy palmer, the messenger of—" and he stopped suddenly. "I was his prisoner," answered the man, "and he, who at least ever keeps his word, gave me my life, for I had been condemned to die, at the price that I brought this to you, and took back your answer, or hers, which I have sworn to do." "Answer to what?" "Nay, I know nothing save that there is a writing in the chest. Its purport I am not told, who am but a messenger bound by oath to do certain things. Open the chest, lord, and meanwhile, if you have food, I have travelled far and fast." Sir Andrew went to a door and called to his men-servants, whom he bade give meat to the palmer and stay with him while he ate. Then he told Godwin and Wulf to lift the box and bring it to the solar, and with it hammer and chisel in case they should be needed, which they did, setting it upon the oaken table. "Open," said Sir Andrew. So they ripped off the canvas, 2 folds of it, revealing within a box of dark, foreign-looking wood, bound with iron bands, at which they laboured long before they could break them. At length it was done, and there within was another box, beautifully made of polished ebony, and sealed at the front and ends with a strange device. This box had a lock of silver to which was tied a silver key. "At least it has not been tampered with," said Wulf, examining the unbroken seals. But Sir Andrew only repeated, "Open and be swift. Here, Godwin, take the key, for my hand shakes with cold." The lock turned easily, and the seals being broken, the lid rose upon its hinges, while as it did so a scent of precious odours filled the place. Beneath, covering the contents of the chest, was an oblong piece of worked silk, and lying on it a parchment. Sir Andrew broke the thread and seal and unrolled the parchment. Within it was written over in strange characters. Also there was a second unsealed roll, written in a clerky hand in Norman French, and headed, "Translation of this letter, in case the knight Sir Andrew D'Arcy has forgotten the Arabic tongue, or that his daughter, the lady Rosamund, has not yet learned the same." Sir Andrew glanced at both headings, then said, "Nay, I have not forgotten Arabic, who, while my lady lived, spoke little else with her, and who taught it to our daughter. But the light is bad, and Godwin, you are scholarly. Read me the French. We can compare them afterwards." At this moment Rosamund entered the solar from her chamber, and seeing the 3 of them so strangely employed, said, "Is it your will that I go, father?" "No, daughter, since you are here, stay here. I think that this matter concerns you as well as me. Read on, Godwin." So Godwin read, "In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate, I, Saladin Yusuf Ayyub, commander of the faithful, cause these words to be written, and seal them with my own hand, to the Frankish lord Sir Andrew D'Arcy, husband of my sister by another mother, Sitt Zobeide, the beautiful and faithless, in whom Allah has taken vengeance for her sin. Or if he be dead also, then to his daughter and hers, my niece, and by blood a princess of Syria and Egypt, who among the English is named the Lady Rose of the World. You, Sir Andrew, will remember how many years ago, when we were friends, you by an evil chance became acquainted with my sister Zobeide, while you were a prisoner and sick in my father's house. How, too, Satan put it into her heart to listen to your words of love, so that she became a cross worshipper, and was married to you after the Frankish custom, and fled with you to England. You will remember also, although at the time we could not recapture her from your vessel, how I sent a messenger to you, saying that soon or late I would yet tear her from your arms and deal with her as we deal with faithless women. But within 6 years of that time, sure news reached me that Allah had taken her. Therefore I mourned for my sister and her fate a while, and forgot her and you. Know that a certain knight named Lozelle, who dwelt in the part of England where you have your castle, has told me that Zobeide left a daughter, who is very beautiful. Now my heart, which loved her mother, goes out towards this niece whom I have never seen, for although she is your child, and a cross worshipper at least, save in the matter of her mother's theft, you were a brave and noble knight of good blood, as indeed I remember your brother was also, he who fell in the fight at Haggard. Learn now that having by the will of Allah come to great estate here at Damascus and throughout the East, I desire to lift your daughter up to be a princess of my house. Therefore I invite her to journey to Damascus, and you with her if you live. Moreover, lest you should fear some trap on behalf of myself, my successors and counsellors, I promise in the name of God and by the word of Saladin, which never yet was broken, that although I trust the merciful God may change her heart so that she enters it of her own will, I will not force her to accept the faith or to bind herself in any marriage which she does not desire. Nor will I take vengeance upon you, Sir Andrew, for what you have done in the past, or suffer others to do so, but will raise you to great honour and live with you in friendship as of yore. But if my messenger returns and tells me that my niece refuses this, my loving offer, then I warn her that my arm is long, and I will surely take her as I can. Therefore, within a year of the day that I receive the answer of the lady, my niece, who is named Rose of the World, my emissaries will appear wherever she may be, married or single, to lead her to me, with honour if she be willing, but still to lead her to me if she be unwilling. Meanwhile, in token of my love, I send certain gifts of precious things, and with them my patent of her title as Princess and Lady of the city of Baalbec, which title, with its revenue and prerogatives, are registered in the archive of my empire in favour of her and her lawful heirs, and declared to be binding upon me and my successors forever. The bearer of this letter and of my gifts is a certain cross-worshipper named Nicholas, to whom let your answer be handed for delivery to me. This devoir he is under oath to perform and will perform it, for he knows that if he fails therein, then that he must die. Signed by Saladin, commander of the faithful at Damascus, and sealed with his seal in the spring season of the year of the Haggard 581. Take note also that this writing having been read to me by my secretary before I set my name and seal thereunto, I perceive that you, Sir Andrew, or you, Lady Rose of the World, may think it strange that I should be at such pains and cost over a maid who is not of my religion and whom I never saw, and may therefore doubt my honesty in the matter. Know then the true reason. Since I heard that you, Lady Rose of the World, lived, I have thrice been visited by a dream sent from God concerning you, and in it I saw your face. Now this was the dream, that the oath I made as regards your mother is binding as regards you also. Further, that in some way which is not revealed to me, your presence here will withhold me from the shedding of a sea of blood and save the whole world much misery. Therefore it is decreed that you must come and bide in my house. That these things are so, Allah and his Prophet be my witnesses. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5 of The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades, by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Abigail Rasmussen in April 2012. Chapter 5. The Wine Merchant. Godwin laid down the letter, and all of them stared at one another in amazement. "Surely," said Wulf, "this is some fool's trick played off upon our uncle as an evil jest." By way of answer, Sir Andrew bade him lift the silk that hid the contents of the coffer and see what lay there. Wulf did so, and next moment threw back his head like a man whom some sudden light had blinded, as well he might, for from it came such a flare of gems as Essex had rarely seen before. Red, green, and blue they sparkled, and among them were the dull glow of gold and the white sheen of pearls. "Oh, how beautiful, how beautiful!" said Rosamund. "Ay," muttered Godwin, "beautiful enough to maze a woman's mind till she knows not right from wrong." Wulf said nothing, but one by one drew its treasures from the chest: coronet, necklace of pearls, breast ornaments of rubies, girdle of sapphires, jewelled anklets, and with them veil, sandals, robes, and other garments of gold embroidered purple silk. Moreover, among these also, sealed with the seals of Saladin, his viziers, officers of state, and secretaries, was that patent of which the letter spoke, setting out the full title of the Princess of Baalbec. the extent and boundaries of her great estates, and the amount of her annual revenue, which seemed more money than they had ever heard of. "I was wrong," said Wulf. "Even the Sultan of the East could not afford a jest so costly." "Jest?" broke in Sir Andrew. "It is no jest, as I was sure from the first line of that letter. It breathes the very spirit of Saladin, though he be a Saracen, the greatest man on all the earth, as I, who was a friend of his youth, know well. Ay, and he is right. In a sense, I sinned against him as his sister sinned, our love compelling us. Jest? Nay, no jest, but because a vision of the night which he believes the voice of God, or perhaps some oracle of the magicians, has deeply stirred that great soul of his and led him on to this wild adventure." He paused a while, then looked up and said, "Girl, do you know what Saladin has made of you? Why, there are queens in Europe who would be glad to own that rank and those estates in the rich land above Damascus. I know the city and the castle of which he speaks. It is a mighty place upon the banks of Litani and Orontes, and after its military governor, for that rule he would not give a Christian, you will be first in it, beneath the seal of Saladin, the surest title in all the earth. Say, will you go and queen it there?" Rosamund gazed at the gleaming gems and the writings that made her royal, and her eyes flashed and her breast heaved, as they had done by the church of St. Peter on the Essex coast. Thrice she looked while they watched her, then turned her head as from the bait of some great temptation, and answered one word only, "Nay." "Well spoken," said her father, who knew her blood and its longings. "At least, had the nay been yea, you must have gone alone. Give me ink and parchment, Godwin." They were brought, and he wrote, "To the Sultan Saladin, from Andrew D'Arcy and his daughter Rosamund. We have received your letter, and we answer that where we are, there we will bide in such state as God has given us. Nevertheless, we thank you, Sultan, since we believe you honest, and we wish you well, except in your wars against the Cross. As for your threats, we will do our best to bring them to nothing. Knowing the customs of the East, we do not send back your gifts to you, since to do so would be to offer insult to one of the greatest men in all of the world. But if you choose to ask for them, they are yours, not ours. Of your dream we say that it was but an empty vision of the night, which a wise man should forget. Your servant and your niece." Then he signed, and Rosamund signed after him, and the writing was done up, wrapped in silk, and sealed. "Now," said Sir Andrew, "hide away this wealth, since were it known that we had such treasures in the place, every thief in England would be our visitor, some of them bearing high names, I think." So they laid the gold-embroidered robes and the priceless sets of gems back in their coffer, and having locked it, hid it away in the great iron-bound chest that stood in Sir Andrew's sleeping chamber. When everything was finished, Sir Andrew said, "Listen now, Rosamund, and you also, my nephews. I have never told you the true tale of how the sister of Saladin, who is known as Zobeide, daughter of Ayoub, and afterwards christened into our faith by the name of Mary, came to be my wife. Yet you should learn it, if only to show how evil returns upon a man. After the great Nureddin took Damascus, Ayoub was made its governor. Then, some 23 years ago, came the capture of Haggard, in which my brother fell. Here I was wounded and taken prisoner. They bore me to Damascus, where I was lodged in the palace of Ayoub and kindly treated. Here, too, it was, while I lay sick, that I made friends with the young Saladin and with his sister Zobeide, whom I met secretly in the gardens of the palace. The rest may be guessed, although she numbered but half my years. She loved me as I loved her, and for my sake offered to change her faith and fly with me to England if opportunity could be found, which was hard. Now, as it chanced, I had a friend, a dark and secret man named Jabal, the young sheik of a terrible people, whose cruel rites no Christian understands. They are the subjects of one Mahomet in Persia, and live in the castles of Masyaf, on Lebanon. This man had been in alliance with the Franks, and once in a battle I saved his life from the Saracens at the risk of my own, whereon he swore that I did summon him from the ends of the earth, he would come to me if I needed help. Moreover, he gave me his signet ring as a token, and by virtue of it, so he said, power in his dominions equal to his own, though these I never visited. You know it," and holding up his hand, Sir Andrew showed them a heavy gold ring, in which was set a black stone with red veins running across the stone in the exact shape of a dagger, and beneath the dagger words cut in unknown characters. So in my plight I bethought me of Jabal, and found means to send him a letter sealed with his ring. Nor did he forget his promise, for within 12 days Zobeide and I were galloping for Beirut on 2 horses so swift that all the cavalry of Ayoub could not overtake them. We reached the city, and there were married, Rosamund. There too your mother was baptized a Christian. Thence, since it was not safe for us to stay in the East, we took ship and came safe home, bearing this ring of Jabal with us, for I would not give it up, as his servants demanded that I should do, except to him alone. But before that vessel sailed, a man disguised as a fisherman brought me a message from Ayoub and his son Saladin, swearing that they would yet recapture Zobeide, the daughter of one of them and sister of the other. That is the story, and you see that their oath has not been forgotten, though when in after years they learned of my wife's death, they let the matter lie. But since then Saladin, who in those days was but a noble youth, has become the greatest sultan that the East has ever known, and having been told of you, Rosamund, by that traitor Lozelle, he seeks to take you in your mother's place. And, daughter, I tell you that I fear him." "At least we have a year or longer in which to prepare ourselves, or to hide," said Rosamund. "His palmer must travel back to the East before my uncle Saladin can have our answer." "Aye," said Sir Andrew, "perhaps we have a year." "What of the attack on the quay?" asked Godwin, who had been thinking. "The knight Lozelle was named there, yet if Saladin had to do with it, it seems strange that the blow should have come before the word." Sir Andrew brooded a while, then said, "Bring in this palmer, I will question him." So the man Nicholas, who was found still eating as though his hunger would never be satisfied, was brought in by Wulf. He bowed low before the old knight, and Rosamund, studying them the while with his sharp eyes, and the roof and the floor and every other detail of the chamber, for those eyes of his seemed to miss nothing. "You have brought me a letter from far away, Sir Palmer, who are named Nicholas," said Sir Andrew. "I have brought you a chest from Damascus, Sir Knight, but of its contents I know nothing. At least you will bear me witness that it has not been tampered with," answered Nicholas. "I find it strange," went on the old knight, "that one in your holy garb should be chosen as the messenger of Saladin, with whom Christian men have little to do." "But Saladin has much to do with Christian men, Sir Andrew. Thus he takes them prisoner even in times of peace, as he did me." "Did he, then, take the knight Lozelle prisoner?" "The knight Lozelle," repeated the palmer. "Was he a big, red-faced man with a scar upon his forehead, who always wore a black cloak over his mail?" "That might be he." "Then he was not taken prisoner, but he came to visit the Sultan at Damascus, while I lay in bonds there, for I saw him twice or thrice, though what his business was I do not know. Afterwards he left, and at Jaffa I heard that he had sailed for Europe, 3 months before I did." Now the brethren looked at each other. So Lozelle was in England. But Sir Andrew made no comment, only he said, "Tell me your story, and be careful that you speak the truth." "Why should I not, who have nothing to hide?" answered Nicholas. "I was captured by some Arabs as I journeyed to the Jordan upon a pilgrimage, who, when they found that I had no goods to be robbed of, would have killed me. This, indeed, they were about to do, had not some of Saladin's soldiers came by and commanded them to hold their hands and give me over to them. They did so, and the soldiers took me to Damascus. There I was imprisoned, but not close, and then it was that I saw Lozelle, or at least a Christian man who had some such name, and as he seemed to be in favour with the Saracens, I begged him to intercede for me. Afterwards I was brought before the court of Saladin, and having questioned me, the Sultan himself told me that I must either worship the false prophet or die, to which you can guess my answer. So they led me away, as I thought, to death, but none offered to do me hurt. 3 days later Saladin sent for me again, and offered to spare my life if I would swear an oath, which oath was that I should take a certain package and deliver it to you, or to your daughter named the Lady Rosamund, here at your Hall of Steeple in Essex, and bring back the answer to Damascus. Not wishing to die, I said that I would do this if the Sultan passed his word, which he never breaks, that I should be set free afterwards." "And now you are safe in England, do you propose to return to Damascus with the answer? And if so, why?" "For 2 reasons, Sir Andrew. First, because I have sworn to do so, and I do not break my word any more than does Saladin. Secondly, because I continue to wish to live, and the Sultan promised me that if I failed in my mission, he would bring about my death wherever I might be, which I am sure he has the power to do by magic or otherwise. Well, the rest of the tale is short. The chest was handed over to me as you see it, and with it money sufficient for my faring to and fro and something to spare. Then I was escorted to Joppa, where I took passage on a ship bound to Italy, where I found another ship named the Holy Mary sailing for Calais, which we reached after being nearly cast away. Thence I came to Dover in a fishing boat, landing there 8 days ago, and having bought a mule, joined some travellers to London, and so on here." "And how will you return?" The palmer shrugged his shoulders. "As best I may, and as quickly. Is your answer ready, Sir Andrew?" "Yes, it is here," and he handed him the roll, which Nicholas hid away in the folds of his great cloak. Then Sir Andrew added, "You say you know nothing of all the business in which you play this part?" "Nothing, or rather, only this. The officer who escorted me to Jaffa told me that there was a stir among the learned doctors and diviners at the court because of a certain dream which the Sultan had dreamed 3 times. It had to do with a lady who was half of the blood of Ayoub and half English, and they said that my mission was mixed up with this matter. Now I see that the noble lady before me has eyes strangely like those of the Sultan Saladin," and he spread out his hands and ceased. "You seem to see a good deal, friend Nicholas." "Sir Andrew, a poor palmer who wishes to preserve his throat unslit must keep his eyes open. Now I have eaten well, and I am weary. Is there any place where I may sleep? I must be gone at daybreak, for those who do Saladin's business dare not tarry, and I have your letter." "There is a place," answered Sir Andrew. "Wulf, take him to it, and tomorrow, before he leaves, we will speak again. Till then, farewell, holy Nicholas." With one more searching glance, the palmer bowed and went. When the door closed behind him, Sir Andrew beckoned Godwin to him and whispered, "Tomorrow, Godwin, you must take some men and follow this Nicholas to see where he goes and what he does, for I tell you I do not trust him. I fear him much. These embassies to and from Saracens are strange traffic for a Christian man. Also, although he says his life hangs on it, I think that were he honest, once safe in England here, he would stop, since the first priest would absolve him of an oath forced from him by the infidel." "Were he dishonest, would he not have stolen those jewels?" asked Godwin. "They are worth some risk. What do you think, Rosamund?" "I?" she answered. "Oh, I think there is more in this than any of us dream. I think," she added in a voice of distress and with an involuntary wringing motion of the hands, "that for this house and those who dwell in it, time is big with death, and that sharp-eyed palmer is its midwife. How strange is the destiny that wraps us all about, and how comes the sword of Saladin to shape it, and the hand of Saladin to drag me from my peaceful state to a dignity which I do not seek, and the dreams of Saladin, of whose kin I am, to interweave my life with the bloody policies of Syria and the unending war between Cross and Crescent, that are, both of them, my heritage." Then, with a woeful gesture, Rosamund turned and left them. Her father watched her go and said, "The maid is right. Great business is afoot in which all of us must bear our parts. For no little thing would Saladin stir thus, he who braces himself, as I know well, for the last struggle in which Christ or Mahomet must go down. Rosamund is right. On her brow shines the crescent diadem of the house of Ayyub, and at her heart hangs the black cross of the Christian, and round her struggle creeds and nations. What, Wulf, does the man sleep already?" "Like a dog, for he seems outworn with travel." "Like a dog with one eye open, perhaps. I do not wish that he should give us the slip during the night, as I want more talk with him and other things, of which I have spoken to Godwin." "No fear of that, uncle. I have locked the stable door, and a sainted palmer will scarcely leave us the present of such a mule." "Not he, if I know his tribe," answered Sir Andrew. "Now let us sup, and afterwards take counsel together, for we shall need it before all is done." An hour before the dawn next morning, Godwin and Wulf were up, and with them certain trusted men who had been warned that their services would be needed. Presently Wulf, bearing a lantern in his hand, came to where his brother stood by the fire in the hall. "Where have you been?" Godwin asked. "To wake the palmer?" "No, to place a man to watch the road to Steeple Hill, and another at the creek path. Also to feed his mule, which is a very fine beast, too good for a palmer. Doubtless he will be stirring soon, as he said that he must be up early." Godwin nodded, and they sat together on the bench beside the fire, for the weather was bitter, and dozed till the dawn began to break. Then Wulf rose and shook himself, saying, "He will not think it uncourteous if we rouse him now." And walking to the far end of the hall, he drew a curtain and called out, "Awake, holy Nicholas, awake! It is time for you to say your prayers, and breakfast will soon be cooking." But no Nicholas answered. "Of a truth," grumbled Wulf as he came back for his lantern, "that palmer sleeps as though Saladin had already cut his throat." Then, having lit it, he returned to the guest place. "Godwin," he called presently, "come here. The man has gone." "Gone?" said Godwin as he ran to the curtain. "Gone where?" "Back to his friend Saladin, I think," answered Wulf. "Look, that is how he went," and he pointed to the shutter of the sleeping place that stood wide open, and to an oaken stool beneath, by means of which the sainted Nicholas had climbed up to and through the narrow window slit. "He must be without, grooming the mule which he would never have left," said Godwin. "Honest guests do not part from their host thus," answered Wulf. "But let us go and see." So they ran to the stable and found it locked, and the mule safe enough within. Nor, though they looked, could they find any trace of the palmer, not even a footstep, since the ground was frost-bound. Only on examining the door of the stable they discovered that an attempt had been made to lift the lock with some sharp instrument. "It seems that he was determined to be gone, either with or without the beast," said Wulf. "Well, perhaps we can catch him yet," and he called to the men to saddle up and ride with him to search the country. For 3 hours they hunted far and wide, but nothing did they see of Nicholas. "The knave has slipped away like a night hawk and left as little trace," reported Wulf. "Now, my uncle, what does this mean?" "I do not know, save that it is of a piece with the rest, and that I like it little," answered the old knight anxiously. "Here the value of the beast was of no account, that is plain. What the man held of account was that he should be gone in such a fashion that none could follow him or know whither he went. The net is about us, my nephews, and I think that Saladin draws its string." Still less pleased would Sir Andrew have been could he have seen the palmer Nicholas creeping round the hall while all men slept, ere he girded up his long gown and ran like a hare for London. Yet he had done this by the light of the bright stars, taking note of every window slit in it, more especially of those of the solar, of the plan of the outbuildings also, and of the path that ran to Steeple Creek, some 500 yards away. From that day forward fear settled on the place, fear of some blow that none were able to foresee, and against which they could not guard. Sir Andrew even talked of leaving Steeple and of taking up his abode in London, where he thought that they might be safer. But such foul weather set in that it was impossible to travel the roads, and still less to sail the sea. So it was arranged that if they moved at all, and there were many things against it, not the least of which were Sir Andrew's weak health and the lack of a house to go to, it should not be till after New Year's Day. Thus the time went on, and nothing happened to disturb them. The friends of whom the old knight took counsel laughed at his forebodings. They said that so long as they did not wander about unguarded, there was little danger of any fresh attack upon them, and if one should by chance be made, with the aid of the men they had, they could hold the hall against a company until help was summoned. Moreover, at heart, none of them believed that Saladin or his emissaries would stir in this business before the spring, or more probably until another year had passed. Still, they always set guards at night, and besides themselves kept 20 men sleeping at the hall. Also they arranged that on the lighting of a signal fire upon the tower of Steeple Church, their neighbours should come to succour them. So the time went on towards Christmas, before which the weather changed and became calm, with sharp frost. It was on the shortest day that Prior John rode up to the hall and told them that he was going to Southminster to buy some wine for the Christmas feast. Sir Andrew asked what wine there was at Southminster. The prior answered that he had heard that a ship, laden amongst other things with wine of Cyprus of wonderful quality, had come into the river Crouch with her rudder broken. He added that as no shipwrights could be found in London to repair it till after Christmas, the chapman, a Cypriot, who was in charge of the wine, was selling as much as he could in Southminster and to the houses about at a cheap rate, and delivering it by means of a wain that he had hired. Sir Andrew replied that this seemed a fair chance to get fine liquor, which was hard to come by in Essex in those days. The end of it was that he bade Wulf, whose taste in strong drink was nice, to ride with the prior into Southminster, and, if he liked the stuff, to buy a few casks of it for them to make merry with at Christmas, although he himself, because of his ailments, now drank only water. So Wulf went, nothing loath. In this dark season of the year, when there was no fishing, it grew very dull, loitering about the hall, and since he did not read much, like Godwin, sitting for long hours by the fire at night, watching Rosamund going to and fro upon her tasks, but not speaking with her overmuch. For notwithstanding all their pretence of forgetfulness, some sort of veil had fallen between the brethren and Rosamund, and their intercourse was not so open and familiar as of old. She could not but remember that they were no more her cousins only, but her lovers also, and that she must guard herself lest she seemed to show preference to one above the other. The brethren, for their part, must always bear in mind also that they were bound not to show their love, and that their cousin Rosamund was no longer a simple English lady, but also by creation as by blood, a princess of the East, whom destiny might yet lift beyond the reach of either of them. Moreover, as has been said, dread sat upon that roof tree like a croaking raven, nor could they escape from the shadow of its wing. Far away in the east a mighty monarch had turned his thoughts towards this English home, and the maid of his royal blood who dwelt there, and who was mingled with his visions of conquest and of the triumph of his faith. Driven on by no dead oath, by no mere fancy or imperial desire, but by some spiritual hope or need, he had determined to draw her to him, by fair means if he could, if not, by foul. Already means both foul and fair had failed, for that the attack at Death Creek Quay had to do with this matter they could no longer doubt. It was certain also the others would be tried again and again till his end was won, or Rosamund was dead, for here, if even she would go back upon her word, marriage itself could not shield her. So the house was sad, and saddest of all seemed the face of the old knight, Sir Andrew, oppressed as he was with sickness, with memories and fears. Therefore Wulf could find pleasure even in an errand to Southminster to buy wine, of which, in truth, he would have been glad to drink deeply, if only to drown his thoughts awhile. So away he rode up Steeple Hill with the prior, laughing as he used to do before Rosamund led him to gather flowers at St. Peter's on the Wall. Asking where the foreign merchant dwelt who had wine to sell, they were directed to an inn near the minster. Here in a back room they found a short, stout man, wearing a red cloth cap, who was seated on a pillow between two kegs. In front of him stood a number of folk, gentry and others, who bargained with him for his wine and the silks and embroideries that he had to sell, giving the latter to be handled and samples of the drink to all who asked for them. "Clean cups," he said, speaking in bad French to the drawer who stood beside him. "Clean cups, for here come a holy man and a gallant knight who wish to taste my liquor. Nay, fellow, fill them up, for the top of Mount Trooidos in winter is not so cold as this cursed place, to say nothing of its damp, which is that of a dungeon," and he shivered, drawing his costly shawl closer around him. "Sir Abbot, which will you taste first, the red wine or the yellow? The red is the stronger, but the yellow is the more costly, and a drink for saints in paradise and abbots upon earth. The yellow from Crienia, Well, you are wise. They say it was my patron Saint Helena's favourite vintage when she visited Cyprus, bringing with her Disma's cross." "Are you a Christian, then?" asked the prior. "I took you for a paynim." "Were I not a Christian, would I visit this foggy land of yours to trade in wine, a liquor forbidden to the Moslems?" answered the man, drawing aside the folds of his shawl and revealing a silver crucifix upon his broad breast. "I am a merchant of the Famagusta in Cyprus, Georgios by name, and of the Greek Church, which you Westerners hold to be heretical. But what do you think of that wine, holy abbot?" The prior smacked his lips. "Friend Georgios, it is indeed a drink for the saints," he answered. "Aye, and has been a drink for sinners ere now. For this is the very tipple that Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, drank with her Roman lover Antony, of whom you, being a learned man, may have heard. And you, Sir Knight, what say you of the black stuff? Mavro we call it, not the common, but that which has been 20 years in cask." "I have tasted worse," said Wulf, holding out his horn to be filled again. "Aye, and will never taste better if you live as long as the Wandering Jew. Well, sirs, may I take your orders? If you are wise, you will make them large, since no such chance is likely to come your way again, and that wine, yellow or red, will keep a century." Then the chaffering began, and it was long and keen. Indeed, at one time they nearly left the place without purchasing, but the merchant Georgios called them back and offered to come to their terms if they would take double the quantity, so as to make up a cartload between them, which he said he would deliver before Christmas Day. To this they consented at length, and departed homewards, made happy by the gifts with which the chapman clinched his bargain after the Eastern fashion. To the prior he gave a roll of worked silk, to be used as an edging to an altar cloth or banner, and to Wulf a dagger handle, quaintly carved in olive wood to the fashion of a rampant lion. Wulf thanked him, and then asked him with a somewhat shamed face if he had more embroidery for sale, whereat the prior smiled. The quick-eyed Cypriote saw the smile, and inquired if it might be needed for a lady's wear, at which some neighbours present in the room laughed outright. "Do not laugh at me, gentlemen," said the Eastern, "for how can I, a stranger, know this young knight's affairs, and whether he has mother or sisters or wife or lover? Well, here are broideries fit for any of them." Then, bidding his servant bring a bale, he opened it and began to show his goods, which indeed were very beautiful. In the end, Wulf purchased a veil of gauze-like silk, worked with golden stars, as a Christmas gift for Rosamund. Afterwards, remembering that even in such a matter he must take no advantage of his brother, he added to it a tunic broidered with gold and silver flowers, such as he had never seen, for they were Eastern tulips and anemones, which Godwin would give her also if he wished. These silks were costly, and Wulf turned to the prior to borrow money, but he had no more upon him. Georgios said, however, that it mattered nothing, as he would take a guide from the town and bring the wine in person, where he could receive payment for the broideries, of which he hoped to sell more to the ladies of the house. He offered also to go with the prior and Wulf to where his ship lay in the river, and show them many other goods aboard of her, which, he explained to them, were the property of a company of Cyprian merchants who had embarked upon this venture jointly with himself. This they declined, however, as the darkness was not far off, but Wulf added that he would come after Christmas with his brother to see the vessel that had made so great a voyage. Georgios replied that they would be very welcome, but if he could make shift to finish the repairs to his rudder, he was anxious to sail for London while the weather held calm, for there he looked to sell the bulk of his cargo. He added that he had expected to spend Christmas at that city, but their helm having gone wrong in rough weather, they were driven past the mouth of Thames, and had they not drifted into that of the Crouch, would, he thought, have foundered. So he bade them farewell for that time, but not before he had asked and received the blessing of the prior. Thus the pair of them departed, well pleased with their purchases, and the Cypriot Georgios, whom they found a very pleasant merchant. Prior John stopped to eat at the hall that night, when he and Wulf told of all their dealings with this man. Sir Andrew laughed at the story, showing them how they had been persuaded by the Eastern to buy a great deal more wine than they needed, so that it was he and not they who had the best of the bargain. Then he went on to tell tales of the rich island of Cyprus, where he had landed many years before and stayed a while, and of the gorgeous court of its emperor and of its inhabitants. These were, he said, the cunningest traders in the world, so cunning indeed that no Jew could overmatch them. Bold sailors also which they had from the Phoenicians of Holy Writ, who, with the Greeks, were their forefathers, adding that what they told him of this Georgios accorded well with the character of that people. Thus it came to pass that no suspicion of Georgios or his ship entered the mind of any one of them, which indeed was scarcely strange, seeing how well his tale held together, and how plain were the reasons of his presence and the purpose of his dealings in wines and silks. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of The Brethren, A Tale of the Crusades, by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Abigail Rasmussen in April 2012. Chapter 6. The Christmas Feast at Steeple. The 4th day after Wulf's visit to Southminster was Christmas morning, and the weather being bad, Sir Andrew and his household did not ride to Stangate, but attended Mass in Steeple Church. Here, after service, according to his custom on this day, he gave a largesse to his tenants and villeins, and with it his good wishes and a caution that they should not become drunk at their Yuletide feast, as was the common habit of the time. "We shall not get the chance," said Wulf, as they walked to the hall, "since that merchant Georgios has not delivered the wine, of which I hoped to drink a cup tonight." "Perhaps he has sold it at a better price to someone else. It would be like a Cypriot," answered Sir Andrew, smiling. And as had been agreed between them, together the brethren gave their Christmas gifts to Rosamund. She thanked them prettily enough, and much admired the beauty of the work. When they told her that it had not yet been paid for, she laughed and said that, however they were come by, she would wear both tunic and veil at their feast, which was to be held at nightfall. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a servant came into the hall to say that a wain, drawn by 3 horses and accompanied by 2 men, one of whom led the horses, was coming down the road from Steeple village. "Our merchant, and in time after all," said Wulf, and followed by the others, he went out to meet them. Georgios it was, sure enough, wrapped in a great sheepskin cloak such as Cypriots wear in winter, and seated on the head of one of his own barrels. "Your pardon, knights," he said, as he scrambled nimbly to the ground. "The roads in this country are such that, although I have left nearly half my load at Stangate, it has taken me 4 long hours to come from the Abbey here, most of which time we spent in mud-holes that have wearied the horses and, as I fear, strained the wheels of this crazy wagon. Still, "Here we are at last, and, noble sir," he added, bowing to Sir Andrew, "here too is the wine that your son bought of me." "My nephew," interrupted Sir Andrew. "Once more your pardon. I thought from their likenesses to you that these knights were your sons." "Has he bought all that stuff?" asked Sir Andrew, for there were 5 tubs on the wagon, besides 1 or 2 smaller kegs and some packages wrapped in sheepskin. "No, alas," answered the Cypriote ruefully and shrugging his shoulders. "Only 2 of the Mavro. The rest I took to the abbey, for I understood the holy prior to say he would purchase 6 casks, but it seems that it was but 3 he needed." "He said 3," put in Wulf. "Did he, sir? Then doubtless the error was mine, who speak your tongue but ill. So I must drag the rest back again over those accursed roads," and he made another grimace. "Yet I will ask you, sir," he added to Sir Andrew, "to lighten the load a little by accepting this small keg of the old sweet vintage that grows on the slopes of Trooidos." "I remember it well," said Sir Andrew with a smile. "But, friend, I do not wish to take your wine for nothing." At these words the face of Georgios beamed. "What, noble sir!" he exclaimed. "Do you know my land of Cyprus? Oh, then indeed I kiss your hands, and surely you will not affront me by refusing this little present. Indeed, to be frank, I can afford to lose its price, who have done a good trade even here in Essex." "As you will," said Sir Andrew. "I thank you, and perhaps you have other things to sell." "I have, indeed, a few embroideries, if this most gracious lady would be pleased to look at them. Some carpets also, such as the Moslems used to pray on in the name of their false prophet Mahomet," and turning, he spat upon the ground. "I see that you are a Christian," said Sir Andrew. "Yet, although I fought against them, I have known many a good Moslem man, nor do I think it necessary to spit at the name of Mahomet, who, to my mind, was a great man deceived by the artifice of Satan." "Neither do I," said Godwin reflectively. "Its true servants should fight the enemies of the cross and pray for their souls, not spit at them." The merchant looked at them curiously, fingering the silver crucifix that hung upon his breast. "The captors of the holy city thought otherwise," he said, "when they rode into the Mosque El Aqsa up to their horses' knees in blood, and I have been taught otherwise. But the times grow liberal, and, after all, what right has a poor trader whose mind, alas, is set more on gain than on the sufferings of the blessed Son of Mary," and he crossed himself, "to form a judgment upon such high matters? Pardon me, I accept your reproof, who perhaps am bigoted." Yet, had they but known it, this reproof was to save the life of many a man that night. "May I ask help with these packages?" he went on, "as I cannot open them here, and to move the casks? Nay, the little keg I will carry myself, as I hope that you will taste of it at your Christmas feast. It must be gently handled, though I fear me that those roads of yours will not improve its quality." Then, twisting the tub from the end of the wain onto his shoulder in such a fashion that it remained upright, he walked off lightly towards the open door of the hall. "For one not tall, that man is strangely strong," thought Wulf, who followed with a bale of carpets. Then the other casks of wine were stowed away in the stone cellar beneath the hall. Leaving his servant, a silent, stupid-looking, dark-eyed fellow named Petros, to bait the horses, Georgios entered the hall and began to unpack his carpets and embroideries with all the skill of one who had been trained in the bazaars of Cairo, Damascus, or Nicosia. Beautiful things they were which he had to show, broideries that dazzled the eye, and rugs of many hues, yet soft and bright as an otter's pelt. As Sir Andrew looked at them, remembering long dead days, his face softened. "I will buy that rug," he said, "for of a truth it might be one on which I lay sick many a year ago in the house of Ayyub at Damascus. Nay, I haggle not at the price. I will buy it." Then he fell to thinking how, whilst lying on such a rug, indeed, although he knew it not, it was the same, looking through the rounded beads of the wooden lattice-work of his window, he had first seen his Eastern wife walking in the orange garden with her father Ayyub. Afterwards, still recalling his youth, he began to talk of Cyprus, and so time went on until the dark was falling. Now Georgios said that he must be going, as he had sent back his guide to Southminster, where the man desired to eat his Christmas feast. So the reckoning was paid. It was a long one, and while the horses were harnessed to the wain, the merchant bored holes in the little cask of wine and set spigots in them, bidding them all be sure to drink of it that night. Then, calling down good fortune on them for their kindness and liberality, he made his salaams in the Eastern fashion, and departed, accompanied by Wulf. Within 5 minutes there was a sound of shouting, and Wulf was back again, saying that the wheel of the wain had broken at the first turn, so that now it was lying upon its side in the courtyard. Sir Andrew and Godwin went out to see to the matter, and there they found Georgios wringing his hands, as only an Eastern merchant can, and cursing in some foreign tongue. "Noble knights," he said, "what am I to do? Already it is nearly dark, and how I shall find my way up yonder steep hill I know not. As for the priceless broideries, I suppose they must stay here for the night, since that wheel cannot be mended till tomorrow." "As you had best do also," said Sir Andrew kindly. "Come, man, do not grieve. We are used to broken axles here in Essex, and you and your servant may as well eat your Christmas dinners at Steeple as in Southminster." "I thank you, Sir Knight, I thank you. But why should I, who am but a merchant, thrust myself upon your noble company? Let me stop outside with my man Petros, and dine with your people in that barn, where I see they are making ready their food." "By no means," answered Sir Andrew. "Leave your servant with my people, who will look after him, and come you into the hall, and tell me some more of Cyprus till our food is ready, which will be soon. Do not fear for your goods, they shall be placed under cover." "All unworthy as I am, I obey," answered the obsequious Georgios. "Petros, do you understand? This noble lord gives us hospitality for the night. His people will show you where to eat and sleep, and help you with your horses." This man, who, he explained, was a Cypriot, a fisherman in summer and a muleteer in winter, bowed, and fixing his dark eyes upon those of his master, spoke in some foreign tongue. "You hear what he says? The silly fellow," said Georgios. "What? Do you not understand Greek? Only Arabic? Well, he asked me to give him money to pay for his dinner and his night's lodging. You must forgive him, for he is but a simple peasant, and cannot believe that anyone may be lodged and fed without payment. I will explain to him, the pig." And explain he did in shrill, high notes, of which no one else could understand a word. "There, Sir Knight, I do not think he will offend you so again. Ah, look, he is walking off. He is sulky. Well, let him alone. He will be back for his dinner, the pig. Oh, the wet and the wind! A Cypriot does not mind them in his sheepskin, in which he will sleep even in the snow." So, Georgios still declaiming upon the shortcomings of his servant, they went back into the hall. Here the conversation soon turned upon other matters, such as the differences between the creeds of the Greek and Latin churches, a subject upon which he seemed to be an expert. and the fear of the Christians in Cyprus, lest Saladin should attempt to capture that island. At length 5 o'clock came, and Georgios, having first been taken to the lavatory, it was but a stone trough, to wash his hands, was led to the dinner, or rather to the supper table, which stood upon a dais in front of the entrance to the solar. Here places were laid for 6: Sir Andrew, his nephews, Rosamund, the chaplain Matthew, who celebrated masses in the church and ate at the hall on feast days, and the Cypriot merchant, Georgios himself. Below the dais, and between it and the fire, was another table at which were already gathered 12 guests, being the chief tenants of Sir Andrew and the reeves of his outlying lands. On most days the servants of the house, with the huntsmen, swineherds, and others, sat at a third table beyond the fire. But as nothing would stop these from growing drunk on the good ale at a feast, and though many ladies thought little of it, there was no sin that Rosamund hated so much as this. Now their lord sent them to eat and drink at their ease in the barn, which stood in the courtyard with its back to the moat. When all had taken their seats, the chaplain said grace, and the meal began. It was rude, but very plentiful. First, borne in by the cook on a wooden platter, came a great codfish, whereof he helped portions to each in turn, laying them on their trenchers, that is, large slices of bread, whence they ate them with the spoons that were given to each. After the fish appeared the meats, of which there were many sorts, served on silver spits. These included fowls, partridges, duck, and chief of all, a great swan, that the tenants greeted by knocking their horn mugs upon the table, after which came the pastries, and with them nuts and apples. For drink, ale was served at the lower table. On the dais, however, they drank some of the black wine which Wulf had bought, that is, except Sir Andrew and Rosamund, the former because he dared not, and the latter because she had always hated any drink but water, a dislike that came to her, doubtless, with her Eastern blood. Thus they grew merry, since their guest proved himself a cheerful fellow, who told them many stories of love and war, for he seemed to know much of loves, and to have been in sundry wars. At these even Sir Andrew, forgetting his ailments and forebodings, laughed well, while Rosamund, looking more beautiful than ever in the gold-starred veil and the broidered tunic which the brethren had given her, listened to them, smiling somewhat absently. At last the feast drew towards its end, when suddenly, as though struck by a sudden recollection, Georgios exclaimed, "The wine! The liquor amber from Chuedo! I had forgotten it. Noble knight, have I your leave to draw?" "Aye, excellent merchant," answered Sir Andrew. "Certainly you can draw your own wine." So Georgios rose and took a large jug and a silver tankard from the sideboard where such things were displayed. With these he went to the little keg, which, it will be remembered, had been stood ready upon the trestles, and bending over it while he drew the spigots, filled the vessels to the brim. Then he beckoned to a reeve sitting at the lower table to bring him a leather jack that stood upon the board. Having rinsed it out with wine, he filled that also, handing it with the jug to the reeve to drink their lord's health on this Yule night. The silver vessel he bore back to the high table, and with his own hand filled the horn cups of all present, Rosamund alone excepted, for she would touch none, although he pressed her hard and looked vexed at her refusal. Indeed, it was because it seemed to pain the man that Sir Andrew, ever courteous, took a little himself, although, when his back was turned, he filled the goblet up with water. At length, when all was ready, Georgios charged, or seemed to charge, his own horn, and lifting it, said, Let us drink, every one of us, to the noble knight, Sir Andrew Darcy, to whom I wish, in the phrase of my own people, that he may live forever. Drink, friends, drink deep, for never will wine such as this pass your lips again." Then, lifting his beaker, he appeared to drain it in great gulps, an example which all followed, even Sir Andrew drinking a little from his cup, which was 3 parts filled with water. There followed a long murmur of satisfaction. "Wine, it is nectar," said Wulf. "Aye," put in the chaplain Matthew, "Adam might have drunk this in the garden," while from the lower table came jovial shouts of praise of this smooth, cream-like vintage. Certainly that wine was both rich and strong. Thus, after his sup of it, a veil, as it were, seemed to fall on the mind of Sir Andrew, and to cover it up. It lifted again, and lo, his brain was full of memories and foresights. Circumstances which he had forgotten for many years came back to him all together, like a crowd of children tumbling out to play. These passed, and he grew suddenly afraid. Yet what had he to fear that night? The gates across the moat were locked and guarded. Trusty men, a score or more of them, ate in his outbuildings within those gates, while others, still more trusted, sat in his hall, and on his right hand and on his left were those 2 strong and valiant knights, Sir Godwin and Sir Wulf. No, there was nothing to fear, and yet he felt afraid. Suddenly he heard a voice speak. It was Rosamund's, and she said, "Why is there such silence, father? A while ago I heard the servants and bondsmen carousing in the barn. Now they are still as death. Oh, and look, are all here drunken? Godwin!" But as she spoke, Godwin's head fell forward on the board, while Wulf rose, half drew his sword, then threw his arm about the neck of the priest, and sank with him to the ground. As it was with these, so it seemed with all, for folk rocked to and fro, then sank to sleep, every one of them save the merchant Georgios, who rose to call another toast. "Stranger," said Sir Andrew in a heavy voice, "your wine is very strong." "It would seem so, Sir Knight," he answered, "but I will wake them from their wuzzle." Springing from the dais, lightly as a cat, he ran down the hall, crying, "Air is what they need, air!" Now coming to the door, he threw it wide open, and drawing a silver whistle from his robe, blew it long and loud. "What?" he laughed. "Do they still sleep? Why, then, I must give a toast that will rouse them all." And seizing a horn mug, he waved it and shouted, "Arouse you, ye drunkards, and drink to the Lady Rose of the World, Princess of Baalbec, and niece to my royal master, Yusuf Saladin, who sends me to lead her to him." "Oh, father!" shrieked Rosamund. "The wine was drugged, and we are betrayed." As the words passed her lips, there rose a sound of running feet, and through the open door at the far end of the hall burst in a score or over of armed men. Then at last Sir Andrew saw and understood. With a roar of rage like that of a wounded lion, he seized his daughter and dragged her back with him down the passage into the solar, where a fire burned and lights had been lit ready for their retiring, flinging to and bolting the door behind them. "Swift," he said as he tore his gown from him. "There is no escape, but at least I can die fighting for you. Give me my mail." She snatched his hauberk from the wall, and while they thundered at the door, did it on to him, aye, and his steel helm also, and gave him his long sword and his shield. "Now," he said, "help me." And they thrust the oak table forward and overset it in front of the door, throwing the chairs and stools on either side, that men might stumble on them. "There is a bow," he said, "and you can use it as I have taught you. Get to one side and out of reach of the sword sweeps, and shoot past me as they rush. It may stay one of them. Oh, that Godwin and Wulf were here, and we would still teach these Paynim dogs a lesson." Rosamund made no answer, but there came into her mind a vision of the agony of Godwin and of Wulf, should they ever wake again to learn what had chanced to her and them. She looked round. Against the wall stood a little desk, at which Godwin was wont to write, and on it lay a pen and parchment. She seized them, and as the door gave slowly inwards, scrawled, "Follow me to Saladin. In that hope I live on. Rosamund." Then, as the stout door at length crashed in, Rosamund turned what she had written face downwards on the desk, and seizing the bow, set an arrow to its string. Now it was down, and on rushed the mob up the 6 feet of narrow passage. At the end of it, in front of the overturned table, they halted suddenly. For there before them, skull emblazoned shield on arm, his long sword lifted, and a terrible wrath burning in his eyes, stood the old knight, like a wolf at bay, and by his side, bow in hand, the beauteous Lady Rosamund, clad in all her festal broideries. "Yield you!" cried a voice. By way of answer the bowstring twanged, and an arrow sped home to its feathers through the throat of the speaker, so that he went down, grabbing at it, and spoke no more forever. As he fell clattering to the floor, Sir Andrew cried in a great voice, "We yield not to pagan dogs and prisoners. Ah, D'Arcy, meet D'Arcy, meet death." Thus for the last time did old Sir Andrew utter the war cry of his race, which he had feared would never pass his lips again. His prayer had been heard, and he was to die as he had desired. "Down with him! Seize the princess!" said a voice. It was that of Georgios, no longer humble with a merchant's obsequious whine, but speaking in tones of cold command, and in Arabic. For a moment the swarthy mob hung back, as well they might in face of that glittering sword. "Saladin! Saladin!" On they surged with flashing spears and scimitars. The overthrown table was in front of them, and one leapt upon its edge, but as he leapt, the old knight, all his years and sickness forgotten now, sprang forward and struck downwards, so heavy a blow that in the darkling mouth of the passage the sparks streamed out, and where the Saracen's head had been appeared his heels. Back Sir Andrew stepped again to win space for his sword play, while round the ends of the table broke 2 fierce-faced men. At one of them Rosamund shot with her bow, and the arrow pierced his thigh, but as he fell he struck with his keen scimitar and shore the end off the bow, so that it was useless. The second man caught his foot in the bar of the oak chair, which he did not see, and went down prone, while Sir Andrew, taking no heed of him, rushed with a shout at the crowd who followed, and catching their blows upon his shield, rained down others so desperate that, being hampered by their very number, they gave before him and staggered back along the passage. "Guard your right, father!" cried Rosamund. He sprang round to see the Saracen, who had fallen on his feet. At him he went, nor did the man wait the onset, but turned to fly, only to find his death, for the great sword caught him between neck and shoulders. Now a voice cried, "We make poor sport with this old lion and loose men. Keep clear of his claws, and whelm him with spear casts." But Rosamund,
who understood their tongue, sprang in front of him and answered in Arabic, "Aye, through my breast, and go tell that tale to Saladin." Then, clear and calm, was heard the command of Georgios: "He who harms a hair of the princess dies. Take them both living if you may, but lay no hand on her. Stay, let us talk." So they ceased from their onslaught and began to consult together. Rosamund touched her father and pointed to the man who lay upon the floor with an arrow through his thigh. He was struggling to his knee, raising the heavy scimitar in his hand. Sir Andrew lifted his sword as a husbandman lifts a stick to kill a rat. Then let it fall again, saying, "I fight not with wounded. Drop that steel and get you back to your own folk." The fellow obeyed him, yes, and even touched the floor with his forehead in salaam as he crawled away, for he knew that he had been given his life, and that the deed was noble towards him, who had planned a coward stroke. Then Georgios stepped forward, no longer the same Georgios who had sold poisoned wine and Eastern broideries, but a proud-looking, high-browed Saracen, clad in the mail which he wore beneath his merchant's robe, and in place of the crucifix wearing on his breast a great star-shaped jewel, the emblem of his house and rank. "Sir Andrew," he said, "hearken to me, I pray you. Noble was that act," and he pointed to the wounded man being dragged away by his fellows, "and noble has been your defence, well worthy of your lineage and your knighthood. It is a tale that my master," and he bowed as he said the word, "will love to hear if it pleases Allah that we return to him in safety. Also, you will think that I have played a knave's trick upon you, overcoming the might of those gallant knights, Sir Godwin and Sir Wulf, not with sword blows but with drugged wine, and treating all your servants in like fashion, since not one of them can shake off its fumes before tomorrow's light. So indeed it is, a very scurvy trick, which I shall remember with shame to my life's end, and that perchance may yet fall back upon my head in blood and vengeance. Yet bethink you how we stand, and forgive us. We are but a little company of men in your great country, hidden, as it were, in a den of lions, who, if they saw us, would slay us without mercy. That, indeed, is a small thing, for what are our lives, of which your sword has taken tithe, and not only yours, but those of the twin brethren on the quay by the water?" "I thought it," broke in Sir Andrew contemptuously. "Indeed, that deed was worthy of you, 20 or more men against 2. Georgios held up his hand. "Judge us not harshly," he said, speaking slowly, who, for his own ends, wished to gain time. "You who have read the letter of our Lord, see you, these were my commands: to secure the Lady Rose of the World as best I might, but if possible without bloodshed. Now, I was reconnoitring the country with a troop of the sailors from my ship, who are but poor fighters, and a few of my own people, when my spies brought me word that she had ridden out, attended by only 2 men, and surely I thought that already she was in my hands. But the knights foiled me by strategy and strength, and you know the end of it. So afterwards my messenger presented the letter, which indeed should have been done at first. The letter failed also, for neither you nor the princess," and he bowed to Rosamund, "could be bought. More, the whole country was awakened. You were surrounded with armed men, the knightly brethren kept watch and ward over you, and you were about to fly to London, where it would have been hard to snare you. Therefore, because I must, I, who am a prince and an emir, who also, although you remember it not, have crossed swords with you in my youth, yes, at Herrick, became a dealer in drugged wine. Now hearken, yield you, Sir Andrew, who have done enough to make your name a song for generations, and accept the love of Saladin, whose word you have, the word that, as you know well, cannot be broken, which I, the Lord El Hassan, for no meaner man has been sent upon this errand, plight to you afresh. Yield you and save your life, and live on in honour, clinging to your own faith, till Israel takes you from the pleasant fields of Baalbec to the waters of paradise, if such there be for infidels, however gallant. For know, this deed must be done. Did we return without the princess, Rose of the World, we should die, every one of us, and did we offer her harm or insult, then more horribly than I can tell you. This is no fancy of a great king that drives him on to the stealing of a woman, although she be of his own high blood. The voice